Chapter 613. The flying ship was wheeling in the sky. Hundreds of miles away, a city towering on a lofty mountain was engulfed in a monstrous flame. The city of Diyu was built with boulders as the main material, but the flame on it was the prime flame unleashed by the immortals, which could burn through even the void, let alone ordinary boulders. The pale golden flames silently blanketed everything. The boulders melted amidst the flame, and the magma gradually shrank, eventually turning into wisps of smoke and dissipating in the air. The city was littered with corpses, and the city itself was burned to ashes. A huge pit, hundreds of miles in diameter and several miles deep, had been burned out of the lofty mountain. Some residual magma had piled up in the pit, with bubbles the size of a human head bubbling. A few groups of expressionless people, numb like the walking dead, were walking away from the city along the main roads. They staggered across the boundless wilderness, some of them throwing their heads back and crying from time to time, but there were no tears in their eyes. The fire had evaporated more than half of the liquid in these survivors' bodies, so they had no tears left. From time to time, some of them fell silently to the ground, and a pale golden flame suddenly ignited on their bodies, burning them to ashes. The others turned a blind eye to these people and walked past them. Even their blood relatives didn't have the slightest reaction. There was only one thought in everyone's mind: get away from this city, away from the hell where countless lives were killed. On the flying ship hovering high in the sky, Wuqi was kneeling on one knee on the bow, gasping for breath. There was a piercing wound on his right chest, with faint thunderbolts flashing in it. It was caused by a peak first-tier heaven immortal who burned his immortal soul and sacrificed himself to a sword, becoming one with it and piercing through Wu Qi's defensive barrier and bone armor. If not for his quick reflexes, which allowed him to forcibly rip open the void with his fleshly body and flee about 10 feet away, the sword beam would have pierced through his heart. Even if it could not kill him, it would at least take away half of his life. As he tried his best to absorb the dense purple energy released from Pangu continent to repair his body, the dozens of wounds on Wu Qi's body gradually healed, but the wound on his chest healed at a very slow rate. Wave after wave of severe pain struck Wu Qi, and he could not help but let out a muffled grunt. This battle was too bitter, too difficult. A total of 18 peak stage first-grade heaven immortals led 200 heaven immortals and 3,000 itinerant cultivators to attack Jianfeng City, the capital city of the Dark River Province, a fourth-grade province under the Central Province. All the military forces in Jianfeng City had been mobilized, and they followed Bo Yunting to wipe out all the itinerant cultivators in Zhong Province. Upon receiving the urgent military report that Jianfeng City was under attack, Wu Qi, who was leading an army to besiege a gathering place of itinerant cultivators tens of thousands of miles away, immediately led 3,000 soldiers under his command to Jianfeng City. 18 peak stage first-grade heaven immortals. Although Wu Qi was full of tricks, and he had killed 11 of them with sneak attacks, and the other 7 heaven immortals had joined forces, Wu Qi was still in a very difficult situation. He had almost abandoned the army and fled several times. As he could not use any divine abilities, he could only use the true body of heaven and earth scripture to fight the enemy with his strong fleshly body and the spells that he was not familiar with yet. Wu Qi was in a very passive position. If it were not for his profound attainment in the true body of heaven and earth scripture and the support of the body of the heavenly dragon cultivated by the dragon transformation script, Wu Qi would have been smashed into a meat pie by those heaven immortals whose overall strength was about the same as his. Even so, the desperate blow from the heaven immortal, which had burned his immortal soul, nearly killed Wu Qi. Fortunately, there were still 4 armies in the vicinity of Jianfeng City. A total of 20,000 soldiers rushed back to reinforce Wu Qi, who was nearly beaten to death. That was how he managed to escape with his life. However, after the great battle, the 3,000 private guards of Yu clan under Wu Qi's command were either killed or wounded, and only about 300 of them managed to escape with their lives. Most of them were crippled, and some of them even had their brains severely damaged. Even if they survived, they could only retire and retire. The 20,000 soldiers who rushed back in time also suffered heavy casualties. More than 27,000 of them were killed or wounded, and only less than 3,000 were still alive. The 4 generals who led the army had also been caught by the desperate enemies and exploded. The 4 generals and their subordinates were either wounded or killed. Now, among the 5 armies, Wu Qi was the only commander who could still move. Even though the 5 armies had risked their lives to fight these immortals and itinerant cultivators, a heaven immortal who cultivated a fire elemental cultivation technique still burned his immortal soul and spewed out a mouthful of prime flame, burning the entire Jianfeng city to the ground. Jianfeng city originally had a population of more than 2 million, but less than 200,000 people managed to escape from the city. Coupled with the natural disasters such as astral winds and thunder during the battle, more than 100 villages and towns near Jianfeng city were completely destroyed, and more than 1 million people were killed or wounded. Damn it! Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Wu Qi struggled to stand up and beckoned to Huang Liang, whose chest, abdomen, and thigh had been stabbed 3 times by the immortal sword. Call those brothers who still have the strength to walk and go down there to save them. There must be people alive in the collapsed houses in the villages. As long as they are alive, we must save them. Huang Liang had just unbuttoned his pants and reached his hand into his crotch to feel around. When he heard Wu Qi's order, he grabbed his crotch hard and jumped up to tie his pants. With a yellow face, he smiled bitterly and said, "May the ancestors bless me, the ancestors bless me." That sword grazed past my pouch and hurt the hamstring of my thigh. Luckily, it didn't hurt my treasure. May the ancestors bless me, may the ancestors bless me. Hearing Huang Liang's words, Wu Qi nearly vomited blood. He roared furiously, "Take our brothers and go save them, or Lao Tzu will castrate you." Huang Liang let out a strange cry and hurriedly jumped up. Limping and limping, he led the over 2,000 soldiers who could still move and rushed to the villages and towns near Jianfeng city. With the strong physical strength of human warriors, even if the houses had collapsed, with no more than 10 soldiers in a village, they could move all the collapsed houses away within 2 hours and rescue the people buried in them. Over 2,000 soldiers were more than enough to give emergency treatment to over 100 villages and towns. Sitting angrily on the prow of the ship, Wu Qi frowned and cursed Lu Bang and his brothers over and over again. Lu Bang, the angel, did not fulfill his duty as an angel at all. He ran around Diyu with a large group of squires. It had been more than 3 months since the day Wu Qi first met Lu Bang. Over the past 90 days, Lu Bang and his men had traveled to 18 provinces in Diyu, all of which were the capital cities of the provinces that had been destroyed. Almost exactly the same as when he was in Zhong province, Lu Bang forcibly took female immortals as concubines along the way. From 97 gathering places of itinerant cultivators in 18 provinces, he had forcibly taken 198 beautiful female immortals as concubines. However, his negotiations with the commander-in-chief of the provinces never yielded any results. Every time, he would show some so-called evidence provided by the myriad immortal alliance that the provinces had persecuted the immortals of the alliance, hoping to use it to persuade the provinces to withdraw their troops. But the evidence never stood up to scrutiny. Just like Wu Qi, the commander-in-chief of the provinces whose cities had been destroyed retorted to Lu Bang with harsh words. After a series of curses, Lu Bang flew into a rage out of humiliation and left with his men, without making any attempt to mediate or explain. Just like that, Lu Bang had traveled to 18 provinces over the past 3 months. However, the places he passed by were still plagued by the disasters of war. There was no relief at all. On the contrary, with Lu Bang's mediation efforts, the itinerant immortals of the provinces seemed to have taken stimulants and began to launch a large-scale counterattack in groups. The siege of Jianfeng city involved over 200 heaven immortals, including 20 peak-level heaven immortals. It was the first time in more than a year that Wu Qi had seen thousands of itinerant cultivators. Moreover, these itinerant cultivators and heaven immortals did not care about their lives. Whenever they fought with the soldiers led by Wu Qi, they would explode themselves at the first sign of exhaustion. At least half of Wu Qi's soldiers were killed by the sudden self-detonation of their opponents. In the face of such crazy enemies, even Wu Qi could only sigh helplessly. When the top heaven immortal who fought him realized that his immortal arts and magical treasures could do nothing to Wu Qi, he burned his immortal soul and launched a desperate attack on Wu Qi. Although his immortal soul was burned to ashes and he died, Wu Qi almost died together with him. It was not only Zhong province, but also the other provinces. Immortals and itinerant cultivators of various provinces were fighting desperately against Yu's army with all kinds of desperate means. In just a few months, as far as Wu Qi knew, the army of Zhong province had lost more than 500,000 soldiers. Forced into a desperate situation, Bo Zhongfu even ordered the old soldiers who had been discharged from the army and returned to the countryside to be recruited back into the army. Even the soldiers who served under Feng Lingling were re-enlisted, reorganized, and returned to the army after being reorganized. Lu Bang, are you here to put out the fire, or to set it on fire? Wu Qi frowned as he looked up at the clouds in the sky. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the recent changes in the situation had something to do with Lu Bang. Don't tell me you deliberately instigated Myriad Immortal Alliance to fight us just to make it easier for you to find a concubine? Wu Qi felt that Lu Bang was capable of doing such a thing. The fiercer the battle became, the more difficult it would be for those itinerant cultivator clans who had been cultivating in seclusion to come out and fight with others. If that happened, wouldn't all the beautiful female immortals in those clans be exposed? While he was cursing what Lu Bang had done in his mind, Wu Qi suddenly heard a crisp sound of metal clashing. The sound was crisp and pleasant, but it came with a strange force that went straight into one's internal organs. Upon hearing it, Wu Qi felt his divine soul tremble, as if a force was about to pour into his head. Hastily, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture, enveloping his entire body with a layer of gray mist, and only then did he stop the invasion of the force. Rising to his feet, Wu Qi looked into the distance. Hundreds of miles away, he saw a group of monks clad in kasayas and holding staffs in their hands, standing next to the crowds of people fleeing Jianfeng City. Each and every one of these monks was tall, dignified, and there was a faint glow of Buddha behind their heads. The suffering of the mortal world, the sorrow of all living beings, join my Buddhist sect, all will be liberated. These monks murmured some words to persuade people to join the Buddhist sect. Gradually, those people who had survived the calamity knelt down to these monks and threw themselves on the ground. Wu Qi's heart suddenly twitched. In just a short period of time to drink a cup of tea, hundreds of thousands of people had knelt down in the wilderness. From these people, a huge amount of faith power soared into the sky and constantly poured into the bodies of these monks. Chapter 614. Buddhist League cultivators had a high demand for the power of faith. Whether it was condensing relics or forming indestructible bodies, the power of faith was an extremely important resource. How could Buddhist League cultivators preach on Pangu continent with such great fanfare? But when the all-out war broke out, the attention of the Yu dynasty was attracted by Myriad Immortal Alliance, those immortals and itinerant cultivators. Naturally, no one paid attention to what the Buddhist League cultivators were doing. For a moment, hundreds of thousands of people fell to their knees, chanting the name of Buddha as the Buddhist League cultivators did. A great amount of pure power of faith poured out of their bodies and poured into the bodies of the Buddhist League cultivators. Gradually, the Buddhist light behind the heads of the Buddhist League cultivators became more condensed. After being transformed by their Dharma, the power of faith was transformed into extremely pure Buddhist energy. About 70% of the Buddhist energy remained in the bodies of the Buddhist League cultivators, while the other 30% transformed into golden beams invisible to the naked eye and rose into the sky, quickly disappearing. What a brilliant plan! Wu Qi sneered. It was indeed a brilliant plan. The officials of the Yu dynasty were a little dull, and their reactions were a little slow in the face of such a clever plan. The Yu dynasty was involved in the situation, while Wu Qi had always been an outsider. Therefore, he could see things more clearly than those officials. A faintly discernible aroma came along with the faint chanting of Sanskrit. A clear spring swayed around Iju, and a few lotus leaves grew out from the spring. 3 pink lotuses bloomed quietly, and a human silhouette shrouded in a faint pink light quietly appeared on the lotuses. The fat monk frowned at Wu Qi with a strange expression on his face. After a moment of silence, the fat monk chanted the name of Buddha and said in a deep and powerful voice, "I am Iju, the preaching disciple of little Rui delightful Buddha of carefree heavenly realm. This general has killed my junior brother today, which has sowed karma with little Rui delightful heavenly realm. If you are willing to bow your head and convert to Buddhism, that will be fine. Otherwise, you will be punished by heaven." Therefore, it was better to take advantage of this germination to strangle it when it had just appeared, lest these Buddhist cultivators develop the power of their believers to a point where they couldn't get rid of them in the future. Currently, the union of 10,000 immortals as well as other immortals and itinerant cultivators were engaged in a fierce battle with the Diyu dynasty. The flames of war were endless, and the people had no way of making a living. Yet, the Buddhist cultivators actually came out. Wu Qi felt that there was definitely something fishy going on here. Opening his chaotic divine eyes, Wu Qi sneered coldly as he looked at the power of faith rising in the air. When the Myriad Immortal Alliance launched a desperate attack on the Diyu dynasty, the Diyu government immediately made the strongest counterattack. The battle between the two sides involved those immortals and itinerant cultivators who were living in seclusion. As a result, the dispute between the Myriad Immortal Alliance and the Diyu dynasty immediately evolved into an all-out war between the immortal powers on Pangu continent and the Diyu dynasty. When the war caused countless people to lose their homes, the Buddhist cultivators took advantage of the situation and used their tongues to bewitch the people into becoming Buddhist believers. Buddhist cultivators. The Blood Soul Immortal's stunning bow was also one of the mystic arts of the Diyu dynasty's Directorate of Celestials. It used the user's own blood essence to conjure a vicious restrictive spell, which specialized in attacking cultivators' souls and souls. It had the powerful effect of defiling one's soul and corroding one's golden body, and was extremely lethal to both immortals and arhats. Wu Qi had spent more than a year fighting outside, and during his free time, he had studied many of the mystic arts of the Directorate of Celestials. Therefore, it was easy for him to conjure such a vicious curse, which was extremely powerful. Wu Qi shook his head. Karma? Convert? Otherwise, it would be the wrath of heaven? These words could only fool those mortals. How could Wu Qi be frightened by them? Laughing mockingly, Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice, "Wrath of heaven? Can you represent the heaven? How dare you?" Wu Qi grinned, then led the dozen flying ships under his command and sped toward the plane. A shrill howl rang out as the monk's dharma body quickly turned green, shriveling and shriveling. His skin and flesh were rotting in many places, and a large amount of pus was oozing out of his body. In just a few breaths of time, the dignified monk had lost all his skin and flesh, turning into a pale green skeleton. A beam of light towered into the sky from the green smoke. The monk's saraira tried to flee, but a few wisps of green smoke wrapped around it. A miserable howl rang out, and the saraira abruptly turned green. As the wind blew, the fist-sized saraira suddenly turned into dust and fell to the ground. Wu Qi's stand was very firm. He knew very well the bewitching power of religion over the people. He did not want the Buddhist League to establish a foundation in Zhong province, and he did not want them to take the opportunity to enter Hai province and his territory. When all the people in his territory became believers of the Buddhist League, who would listen to whom? What if all the soldiers in his army in Hai province were believers of the Buddhist League? Would the army listen to him or the cultivators of the Buddhist League? Was there an eminent Buddhist League overseeing this place? Wu Qi immediately put his guard up. The monks walked among the people who knelt on the ground, chanting the name of Buddha while a faint golden Buddhist light sprinkled from their bodies. Wherever the Buddhist light passed, the wounds on the people's bodies healed quickly, and their exhausted physical strength was quickly replenished. The sadness, grief, confusion, and numbness in their hearts gradually calmed down. There was only warmth and peace in their hearts, as if they had come to the paradise of bliss, where they would never have to go through the cycle of reincarnation again. Wu Qi frowned deeply as he looked at these monks, who were clad in kasayas and holding staffs in their hands, looking solemn and dignified. He had dealt with a group of monks, including Arhat Baosheng. These monks were people who would not get up without benefits, and their Taoist rites were located in outer heavenly realms. Like those immortals, the cultivators of the Buddhist League had been forcefully suppressed by the Yu dynasty on Pangu continent. Wu Qi's face furrowed abruptly. Was this the so-called eminent Buddhist League? Monk Yizhu was so angry that his white flesh was trembling. He pointed a finger at Wu Qi and roared furiously, then suddenly raised a hand toward the sky. A beam of golden light towered into the sky and exploded into a golden rain of light about 100 miles in diameter, forming a huge swastika. Laughing hideously, Monk Yizhu said, "What a ferocious, vile creature. It just so happens that an eminent senior of our sect is overseeing this place. Let him purge your foolish fools." "Why are you in such a hurry to summon me, Yizhu?" A very pretentious voice rang out. Wu Qi took a heavy step forward and unleashed an oppressive aura, causing Yizhu and the cultivators of the Buddhist League behind him to drift back hundreds of feet. "Cut the nonsense!" Wu Qi snapped. "Tell your fellow bald donkeys to get the hell out of Zhong province, or else you'll suffer the same fate as that bald donkey just now." With that ugly face and head full of scars, who else could it be but Lao Ai's precious disciple, Madman Shui? Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath as he vaguely sensed something. Wu Qi felt a vast, mysterious, and frightening force covering the entire sky above Pangu continent. He glanced around with his chaotic divine eyes, and a faint auspicious light spread out in all directions. In a flash, he could see all the changes in the aura within a radius of 10 billion miles. Not only around Jianfeng City, but in other places very far away, there were similar golden auspicious lights towering into the sky. Judging by the number of auspicious lights, there were at least hundreds of thousands of cultivators of the Buddhist League recruiting believers on the battlefield between human and immortal. Wu Qi gave a cold snort and cried out in a deep voice, "Huang Liang, activate all flying ships' defensive mechanisms and prepare for battle." Instead of saying that Liu Bang was trying to extinguish the flames of war, it was better to say that he was fooling people. By assuming a posture of wholeheartedly mediating disputes, he could even anesthetize many people in the Yu dynasty, drawing all their attention to him and the celestial court he represented. Wu Qi looked coldly at the huge group of cultivators and said, "Leave the territory of Zhong province. I don't care what strange plans you Buddhist League have in other places, but not in Zhong province. You want to develop believers in Zhong province? Dream on. Damn you." After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi suddenly stretched out his hands and made a posture of drawing a bow and shooting an arrow. The misty green gas condensed into a bow and a long arrow in his palm. He chanted a few spells in a low voice, and a trace of blood oozed out from the corner of his eyes. The blood flowed into the arrow like a living thing, and a strange magic talisman that looked like a big eye was drawn on the arrowhead. When the cultivators of the Buddhist League saw their fellow disciple killed by an arrow, they all chanted the name of Buddha and flew into the sky angrily. Both sides bumped into each other in midair. A fat monk, standing over 10 feet tall, with a fair and plump face, pointed his finger at Wu Qi and snapped furiously, "How dare you? Why did you hurt my junior brother with such a vicious curse?" Especially when Wu Qi was planning to bring Yen Dan and others to Pangu continent, there were too many unspeakable things in his territory in the future. If the Buddhist League established a foundation in Zhong province, it would be like he suddenly had countless spying eyes around him, and it would be difficult for him to keep any secrets. With a long cry, he thrust his right hand forward, and the arrow shot out silently with a trail of green smoke that was over 300 feet long. Hundreds of miles away, a smiling monk was touching the head of a severely injured elderly man, injecting his power into his body and healing him. Suddenly, an arrow pierced into his chest. Along with a series of hissing noises, the monk's face paled immediately. The green arrow exploded in his chest and transformed into thin streams of green smoke, coiling around his body and wrapping him up. Huang Liang and a few generals stood behind Wu Qi, guarding him with bone talismans in their hands. They were ready to strike at any time. They also looked at the monks in confusion. They could not understand why Wu Qi suddenly attacked them. At least, in Huang Liang's opinion, these monks were helping to appease the common people, so he should save as many people as he could. Chapter 6:15. He was clad in a moon-white monk robe on the inside, and a golden kasaya on the outside. A fist-sized 7-colored glazed Buddhist bead was hanging around his neck, while a string of pink prayer beads made of unknown material was dangling from his left hand. Madman Shui was standing on a lotus flower, putting on a solemn and dignified face of an eminent monk, looking up at the sky with his eyes facing the sky. However, no matter how one looked at him, he would not look like a crown prince even if he was wearing a dragon robe. Madman Shui's attire made him look like a nouveau riche from the Buddhist League. Especially the rouge stain on his cheek that had yet to be wiped off, it was a clear indication that he was a nouveau riche from the Buddhist League. But when Iju saw Madman Shui, he looked like a grandson who had just met his grandfather. With a flattering smile on his face, he bowed and came before Madman Shui, then said in a low voice, "I really deserve to die for troubling you, Venerable One. It's just that when I came here with a few junior brothers to preach the Tao, we bumped into this rude and unreasonable man, who asked us to leave Zhong province. Both of my junior brothers were brutally killed by him." Madman Shui answered in an ostentatious manner, then fixed his eyes on Wu Qi. Wu Qi looked at Madman Shui with a faint smile on his face. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Madman Shui immediately trembled with fear. He glared at Iju with both shock and anger, and was about to lose his temper, but Wu Qi had already stepped out of the flying ship. "Where did this evil monk come from? How dare you come here to seek death? Take this punch from me." Wu Qi winked at Madman Shui as he threw a punch at Madman Shui. Madman Shui gave a loud cry as countless pink lotus petals shot out from all over his body. He clasped his palms together, and a beam of great delight Zen light transformed into a dense mist and shot out, colliding head-on with Wu Qi's punch. Although Wu Qi's punch looked strong and powerful, it actually did not contain any strength at all. The beam of Madman Shui's great delight Zen light only produced a few faint ripples. "How dare you act presumptuously in front of me with such a puny trick?" Madman Shui laughed wildly, then pointed his fingers at Wu Qi. Amidst a series of sizzling noises, tens of thumb-sized thunderbolts darted out, glowing with a pale pink light and glowing with a pale golden Buddhist light. The thunderbolts exploded on Wu Qi's body, and the sound of each thunderbolt explosion was the moaning sound of a young girl reaching the climax. The power of the thunderbolts was not great, but the moaning sound had an extremely strange and magical power that could shake one's soul. Wu Qi frowned slightly. The moaning had no effect on him. However, the faces of the Buddhist cultivators, including monk Iju, were all flushed, and their lower bodies suddenly propped up a tall little tent. Wu Qi cursed under his breath that Loony Blood's thunder technique was really absurd and obscene. Then he gave Loony Blood a quick glance, and both of them flew towards the ruins of Jianfeng City, which had turned into a lake of lava. When they had flown tens of miles away, Wu Qi turned his head and bellowed, "Kill all these baldies for Lao Tzu." Huang Liang was now Wu Qi's most loyal lackey. Wu Qi had fed him with countless money and beautiful girls, and had even intimidated him with his frightening overall strength. Upon hearing Wu Qi's order, Huang Liang did not hesitate. He immediately waved his arm and cried out, "Attack!" Hundreds of oracles standing on the deck of the flying ship raised their arms at the same time, unleashing countless bone arrows that shot towards Iju and his companions. Gleaming with a cold gleam, the bone arrows were as sharp as the fangs of a wolf. The pungent smell of the black smoke assailed the nostrils, and shrill ghost howls could be heard coming out of the black smoke. Obviously, these were not some kind of attack. Some oracles even activated the power of earth, fire, wind, and thunder, filling the sky with strong gales, thunders, and flames, while large meteors fell whistling down from the sky, smashing towards the monks. Amidst the rain of arrows and gales, there were also arrows shot by the soldiers led by Wu Qi. The arrows shot by these specially made crossbows were very powerful, and when the cultivators around Iju were caught off guard, 7 or 8 of them were injured on the spot. Dark green blood gushed out from their wounds. All the arrows were coated with a deadly poison, a poison that even the golden body of Arhat of the Buddhist League with the cultivation base of heaven immortals could not resist. Iju was so angry that his white flesh was shivering. Glancing at Loony Blood, who was fighting further and further away from Wu Qi, he clenched his teeth and bellowed, "Junior brothers, let's release these vile creatures from purgatory." Damn it. I thought we got ourselves a good job this time, but why do we have to risk our lives? With a shake of his staff, Iju unleashed a large sheet of golden Buddhist light to protect himself, and then unleashed all sorts of Buddhist spells like a thunderstorm. The soldiers sent by Wu Qi to rescue the people buried under the collapsed houses had also returned. When they saw Iju and the group of monks fighting against a dozen flying ships, they immediately formed into a battle formation and charged forward with deafening battle cries. Immediately, the oracles on the flying ships waved their arms and recited incantations, sprinkling a large sheet of light onto the soldiers and greatly enhancing their combative strength. While the two groups of people were engaged in a fierce battle, Wu Qi had brought Loony Blood to the ruins of Jianfeng City, several hundred miles away. Hiding in a cave melted by the true flame of an immortal, Wu Qi grabbed Loony Blood's bald head and gave it a hard smack. "TSK, you and your disciple have climbed up the high branch of a primordial immortal, and yet you didn't even send me a message? Since when did you become the Lord of the Merry Buddha of Wishful Heaven Realm? What kind of trick are you playing?" Loony Blood stared at Wu Qi with a distressed face. His bald head was covered with bumps from Wu Qi's smack. Holding his head with both hands, he cried out, "Don't hit me! Don't hit me! I'll tell you everything." Only after Loony Blood told Wu Qi what he and Lao Ai had been doing for the past 1 year did Wu Qi understand what he and Lao Ai had been doing for the past year. It all started from the incident of Miaoying Palace. In the case of Miaoying Palace, Wu Qi had gained a great advantage as he had successfully obtained the innate yang energy and cultivated an innate chaotic spirit body, while Feng Lingling was the one who had fallen into Wu Qi's trap. He had discovered the collusion between King Baishan, King Zhangqiu, and Patriarch Miaoying. But not only did he not contribute to the case, he was pressured by both King Baishan and Patriarch Miaoying. One of them worked hard in the imperial court of Diyu, while the other used her identity as a celestial lord in the celestial court to force Feng Lingling into a desperate situation. After forcing Feng Lingling to retreat from Zhongning City, Lao Ai returned to Miaoying Palace in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean and hooked up with goddess Miao Exin. As the proud disciple of Lao Ai, Madman Shui had hooked up with several dozens of junior disciples of Miaoying Palace, using the primordial yin energy of these female immortals to strengthen his own cultivation base. Lao Ai's great sun magic was truly evil and magical, as it allowed Madman Shui to advance his cultivation base to the realm of heaven immortal in just a few short months. On the other hand, Lao Ai had been cultivating day and night with goddess Miao Exin. As goddess Miao Exin possessed the cultivation base of a gold immortal, just a little bit of her energy essence to Lao Ai would be equal to the hard work of an ordinary heaven immortal for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. On the other hand, Lao Ai's cultivation base was advancing at a tremendous pace, and in just a few months, he had reached the level of a high-tier heaven immortal. The master and disciple had regarded Miaoying Palace as a paradise, and just when they were indulging themselves in the pleasures, the elders of Myriad Immortal Alliance, a celestial lord from the celestial court, Buddha Wishful Joy, and some other important figures suddenly paid them a visit. After a closed-door discussion with these people, Patriarch Miaoying appointed goddess Miao Exin to lead a group of disciples to cooperate with Myriad Immortal Alliance and Buddha Wishful Joy. Lao Ai and Madman Shui were cultivating the great sun magic, while Lao Ai was also cultivating the delightful Zen technique of the Buddhist League, and his prime magical treasure was the Wheel of Delight, an evil Buddhist treasure. Although Buddha Wishful Joy only stayed in Miaoying Palace for a few hours, he took a liking to Lao Ai at first glance. With just a few words from Patriarch Miaoying, he took Lao Ai as his personal disciple and taught him the unfathomable delightful Zen technique of the Buddhist League. With that, Madman Shui's status rose, and he became the Dharma imparter under Buddha Wishful Joy's direct disciple, which gave him a very high position in Minor Rui Free Heaven realm. Because of Lao Ai and Madman Xue's extraordinary innate talent, both of them were the magical creatures of the 9 Dragons Jade Pillar. Buddha Wishful Joy was very pleased with them, and he personally taught them their cultivation base, using the divine ability to enlighten them and elevate their cultivation base to the level of peak stage heaven immortal. Wu Qi's mouth twitched when he heard that. It was not easy for him to cultivate his true body of heaven and earth scripture to the level of peak stage first tier heaven immortal, but Lao Ai and Madman Xue had obtained such great benefits just by changing their cultivation bases. But Buddha Wishful Joy was a mighty Buddha, whose overall strength was equivalent to that of a primordial immortal from the celestial court. It was really easy for him to create 2 heaven immortals. Wu Qi gave Madman Xue a fierce glare and said with a cold snort, "What are you trying to do?" Knowing that Wu Qi had something on his master, Madman Xue dared not to hide anything, and quickly told Wu Qi what was going on behind Myriad Immortal Alliance. As Wu Qi had expected, the nearly insane and destructive attack launched by Myriad Immortal Alliance was an attempt to stir up the flames of war between the Yu Dynasty and the Immortals on Pangu Continent. They wanted to make the people on Pangu Continent homeless and destitute, making it easier for the Buddhist League to preach and recruit new believers. But the expansion of Buddhist League's believers on Pangu Continent was only a part of the whole plan. Myriad Immortal Alliance was just a chess piece in someone's hand, and what they were doing was only to trigger a conflict. Even the Myriad Immortal Alliance had found a perfect excuse in advance for launching such a crazy attack on Yu Province. The sovereign was ambushed and seriously wounded by a king from the imperial clan of the Yu Dynasty, as well as a dozen elders of the alliance. It was one thing to seriously injure those elders, but the sovereign's real identity was the nephew of some almighty figure in the heaven. Now that he was seriously injured, and they could not find any spirit medicine that could heal him, he could die at any time. As the nephew of an important official of the celestial court, an existence as strong as a primordial immortal, once such a vital figure died, the consequences would be extremely serious. Logically speaking, Myriad Immortal Alliance was in the right, and their attack on the Yu Dynasty was justified. Even the fact that they had attacked Ningbo City and over 200 other provinces with stars was justified because they had provided all kinds of evidence. On the other hand, the celestial ambassador Liu Bang was not in Liangzhu to discuss the matter with the human emperor. Instead, he was deliberately traveling to various provinces, trying to mediate the war. He was determined to make the war as fierce as possible. On top of that, he wanted the Yu Dynasty to gain the absolute upper hand and make the immortals and itinerant cultivators on Pangu Continent suffer as much as possible. Wu Qi looked at Madman Xue in horror and said, "Are they crazy? Are they intentionally sending these immortals and itinerant cultivators to their deaths?" Madman Xue rolled his eyes and said to Wu Qi with a wry smile, "Who said these immortals are dead?" Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat as he grabbed Madman Xue's shoulder. Chapter 616. Those immortals were not really dead? The corner of Wu Qi's eyes twitched as he stared at Madman Xue. Vaguely, he felt as if there was a blood-red curtain in front of him, and something extremely terrible was hiding behind it. Madman Xue's words were like a huge hand that pulled the curtain open. Wu Qi felt that he had seen through something. Patriarch Miao Ying was crafting a primordial immortal item under the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. King Baishan and King Zhangqiu were inextricably linked to Miao Ying Palace. The celestial lords of the celestial court and the Buddhas of the Buddhist League had suddenly paid a visit to Miao Ying Palace. The sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance was the nephew of some almighty figure of the celestial court, and the alliance had been working hard to gather all the itinerant immortals and cultivators on Pangu Continent, using various means to gradually form them into an organization with powerful potential power. Since the sovereign was suddenly wounded by a king from the imperial clan of the Yu Dynasty, it was only logical that the alliance would retaliate against the Yu Dynasty. On the other hand, the attack on itinerant cultivators in the Yu province had given the alliance the best excuse to retaliate. It was not only the matter of the sovereign, but also related to the life and death of countless immortals and itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent. Even Wu Qi found it funny. Didn't the ministers of the Yu dynasty find it strange? After those mountain spirits and water demons absorbed the essence of heaven and earth, they naturally gained sentience and cultivated into demons, as it was permitted by the law of heaven and earth. How did so many immortals and itinerant cultivators come to Pangu continent? Where did they get their cultivation technique manuals from? Wasn't there someone pushing this matter from behind the scenes? Like Supremacy 3 Flame, a good friend of Wu Qi's, who was born as a butcher, he could actually find a mystic scripture that could lead him straight to the heaven immortals Tao in a barren mountain. Was it because of his good luck? Or was it because of his ancestral grave? On top of that, the mystic scripture happened to suit Supremacy 3 Flame's spirit root, allowing him to cultivate a fire elemental cultivation technique until he reached the heaven immortal realm. Fortunately, there was an organization like the Myriad Immortal Alliance, which gradually gathered the idle immortals and itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent and brought them together. Even when Wu Qi once assumed the name of Taoist greed and made a name for himself in Anhui City, an emissary from Myriad Immortal Alliance immediately came to him and asked him to join the alliance. This was a whole set of plans, a whole set of extremely detailed plans. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi asked in a deep voice, "How do you know those immortals who died fighting the Yu's army are still alive?" Madman Shui twitched his lips as he stared at Wu Qi and said, "Only after I joined the Buddhist League with my master did I realize the vastness of the Buddhist League and its divine abilities are truly boundless. Firstly, half of the 9 Nether Yellow Springs' 6 paths of reincarnation was already under the control of Buddhism. Secondly, the current Lord Buddha, Amitabha, has an innate extraordinary treasure that was created when the heaven and earth were first created, the 8 treasures lotus throne. It can transform into a transmigration pool of virtues, and as long as a single thread of true spirit is left in it, one will be immortal." Madman Shui smacked his lips enviously and said mysteriously, "As long as a single thread of true spirit is placed in the 8 treasures lotus throne in advance, even if one's body is killed and soul is destroyed, as long as the true spirit remains, after the 8 treasures lotus throne is transformed into a transmigration pool of virtues, it will only take a huge amount of Buddhist willpower to reforge one's golden body, or transform into an arhat, or even a bodhisattva. If one makes a great contribution to the Buddhist League, it is not impossible for one to transform into a Buddha directly." Staring fixedly at Madman Shui, Wu Qi clenched his jaws and said, "All those immortals and itinerant cultivators who fought against us crazily over the past few days, have their true spirits been placed in the 8 treasures lotus throne?" Madman Shui gave Wu Qi a strange look and said with a wry smile, "Tell me, if not for the fact that they have a thread of true spirit in the 8 treasures lotus throne, which gives them no fear of death and promises them great benefits after the battle, who would be so foolish to fight against the army of the Yu dynasty? Myriad Immortal Alliance is just a loose alliance of immortals, and they are not the sons of the sovereign. So, why would they fight so desperately?" According to Madman Shui, almost all the immortals and itinerant cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance, as long as they took part in the battle against the Yu dynasty, had placed a thread of true spirit in the 8 treasures lotus throne in advance. The reason why those immortals and itinerant cultivators who took part in the battle were even crazier and more fanatical than the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance was because the Buddhist League had given them an extra promise. If those immortals who had attained the righteous fruit of heaven immortal perished, they would directly form their arhat golden body in the transmigration pool of virtue, and the power they obtained would definitely be greater than their original strength. If they contributed a certain amount of meritorious service, such as destroying Jianfeng City and killing those immortals who killed and wounded the Great Yu army, they might directly obtain the Buddhahood of Bodhisattva, possessing the overall strength equivalent to that of a gold immortal. Buddhist cultivators did not attach great importance to the improvement of their cultivation base, but to the accumulation of the power of faith, as well as the sudden epiphany. Therefore, there was a saying in the Buddhist League that one could become a Buddha with a single thought. As long as one could comprehend some unique power from the Buddhist scriptures, Even an ordinary mortal could become a Buddha in an instant. With the overall strength of the Buddhas, as long as they did not hesitate to spend a great amount of power of faith, they could definitely fulfill the promise they made to those immortals and itinerant cultivators. They themselves were only heaven immortals, and perhaps they would never be able to become gold immortals. However, as long as they joined the union of myriad immortals in attacking Diyu, risking their lives to destroy some villages and cities, and killing a few of Diyu's soldiers, perhaps when they condensed their golden body in the transmigration pool of virtue, they would have the power of a bodhisattva. They could either be a powerless little heaven immortal for the rest of their lives, or achieve the Buddhahood of bodhisattva in the Buddhist League, which would at least allow them to control a small heavenly realm. Comparing the two, Wu Qi could easily guess the choice of those immortals and itinerant cultivators. The promise the Buddhist League made to those itinerant cultivators was that even if they did not have good aptitude in this life, it would be difficult for them to become heaven immortals. However, since the Buddhist League controlled half of the 6 paths of reincarnation in the Yellow Springs, they could influence the reincarnation of these itinerant cultivators. After these rogue cultivators died, the Buddha Lord would use the power of the merit reincarnation pond to help these rogue cultivators repair their souls. Then he would send them to be reincarnated so that they could enjoy glory and wealth, and at the same time, they would have excellent cultivation aptitude. The Buddhist League promised that after these itinerant cultivators enjoyed everything they had, they would send disciples to bring them into the Buddhist League and do their best to cultivate them. At the very least, they would become arhats. An arhat of the Buddhist League would at least be able to control a populated planet in a small heavenly realm, which was better than being an itinerant cultivator with the lowest status on Pangu continent. With the promise of the Buddhist League and such generous conditions, Myriad Immortal Alliance and those itinerant immortals and itinerant cultivators had caused such heavy losses to Diyu. When these cultivators did not even care about their lives, how many lives would it take for Diyu's soldiers to fight them to the death? Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. Who made this plan? How could it be so vicious and decisive? And what exactly was the purpose of this plan? Overall, Myriad Immortal Alliance was a complete loser in this plan. The sovereign was seriously wounded, and his life was in danger. A dozen elders were severely wounded, and it was unknown if they could recover. Most of the immortals and itinerant cultivators had accepted the conditions of the Buddhist League, and once they died, they would become disciples of the Buddhist League. None of this would benefit Myriad Immortal Alliance. What exactly were they trying to do? Madman Shui could not answer Wu Qi's question. He and Lao Ai were just disciples of Delightful Buddha, and they had just joined the sect. Although they had been ordered to bring many cultivators of the Buddhist League to Pangu continent to stir up trouble, he had not been able to get close to the real core circle of the Buddhist League, and could not figure out the purpose of all this. In general, in the end, only the Buddhist League had received the greatest benefit. How many allies did Myriad Immortal Alliance have on Pangu continent? Each province might have only a few thousand or even tens of thousands of immortals and itinerant cultivators, but under the rule of Diyu, there were tens of thousands of first-grade provinces, and each of them had 300 provinces. So, the total number of immortals owned by Myriad Immortal Alliance was truly a terrifying number. If so many immortals and itinerant cultivators joined the Buddhist League, its overall strength would definitely be greatly improved. And in the process, the Buddhist League would be able to constantly recruit those displaced people. 4 Buddhist League cultivators, natural treasures, spirit herbs, and immortal stones were important, but the foundation of their cultivation lay in the number of believers. For those high-level cultivators, such as bodhisattvas and Buddhas, the more stable their foundation would be, and the stronger their overall strength would be. It was equivalent to Myriad Immortal Alliance fighting for their lives, and all the benefits would be taken away by the Buddhist League. But Wu Qi did not believe that Myriad Immortal Alliance was such a self-sacrificing existence. Just by looking at the style of Li Qinghua, the son of the sovereign, he knew that Myriad Immortal Alliance was not a charity organization. So, what exactly was the Myriad Immortal Alliance trying to do? Why did they involve Patriarch Miao Ying, and even the high-ranking officials of the Celestial Court? And it seemed that Liu Bang, the the celestial ambassador appointed by the celestial emperor, was also involved in this? What exactly were they trying to do? Patting Madman Xue's bald head, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Go back and tell your master about this." Madman Xue grinned, nodded, and said, "Master said that we should just follow behind and take advantage of the situation." Twitching his lips contemptuously, Madman Xue said in a gloomy voice, "We know these baldies are plotting something, but what does that have to do with us? If we don't take the benefits, we will lose our lifespan." Clapping his hands happily, Wu Qi laughed and said, "Isn't that the truth?" After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi whispered a few words to Madman Xue. After that, both men exchanged a glance and nodded at the same time. Wu Qi punched Madman Xue on the shoulder and shattered his shoulder blade. Meanwhile, Madman Xue pulled out a Muni pearl given to him by Buddha of Joy before he left and hit Wu Qi's face with it. The impact caused Wu Qi's face to cave in and nearly disfigure his face. Both men sprung up into the air with their wounds, cursing and swearing as they ran back to the flying ship. This time, it was Wu Qi who was running in the front. Madman Xue produced the Muni pearl given to him by Buddha and smashed Wu Qi with it. The pearls smashed onto Wu Qi's body like raindrops, making all the bones in Wu Qi's body produce cracking noises, while his arms and legs were broken and tendons torn. It was a miserable sight. As soon as Wu Qi returned to the flying ship, he immediately ordered the army to retreat. When Huang Liang and the others saw that Wu Qi was defeated, they quickly turned the ship around and fled. Madman Xue laughed and ordered Yizhu and the others not to chase after them, while he continued to recruit refugees and expand his believers. Wu Qi fled for several tens of thousands of miles. Just as he was about to find a place to rest, an emergency message suddenly came from the voice-transmitting formation on the flying ship. Angel Lu Bang was assassinated in Huangsha province, severely wounded and dying. The assassin was Jing Mo, the left military minister of Huangsha province. Chapter 617. This lad is really ruthless. Touching the wound on his face, Wu Qi gasped in pain. A few days ago, Wu Qi and Madman Xue had put on a good show. Madman Xue had used the Muni Pearl to break all of Wu Qi's tendons and bones, forcing him to flee with his army. The news had spread across Xiong province. After Wu Qi reported the incident to Bo Yunting in an official document, he returned to Hai province with several dozens of his personal guards to recuperate, while the soldiers under his command continued to fight under the leadership of the generals sent by Yu clan. The Muni Pearl was a Buddhist magical artifact. It was crafted by eminent Buddhists by fusing their own Buddhist energy with the willpower of all people and using all kinds of pearls naturally produced by the heaven and earth as their main body. It had the powerful ability to destroy all fabrications and wipe out all evil spirits. The Muni Pearl in Madman Xue's hand was crafted by Buddha Wishful Joy, and its power was extraordinary. Even a gold immortal would have his flesh and bones shattered by a single pearl. It was a very powerful magical artifact. Even though Wu Qi had a very strong fleshly body, he was still severely injured after being struck by the Muni Pearl a few times. His face was also hit by a pearl, and the bridge of his nose was dented. His injuries were even more serious. A thread of Buddhist energy lingered in his wounds, tangling with them. Even if he took some spirit pills and medicines, it would be difficult for him to fully recover. Fortunately, Wu Qi had Princess Zhang Lu by his side, who had inherited the great Tao of the ancient heaven god. Princess Zhang Lu had exercised the power of heaven and earth to neutralize 99% of the Buddhist energy that had invaded Wu Qi's body, and only then did Wu Qi's injuries heal by more than half. However, the face was fragile and delicate. Although most of his injuries had healed, the wound on his face still made Wu Qi feel very uncomfortable. There were still some cracks on his cheekbones, and even when he breathed, Wu Qi felt a sharp pain in his head. Staring at a clear spring amidst the vast expanse of yellow sand, he gave his own face a glance, took a deep breath, and with a sway of his body, he sped forward. This was no longer the central province, but the Yellow Sand province, which was more than 100 provinces away from the central province. This was also the place where the angel Lu Bang was assassinated. The news that Liu Bang was assassinated by the left minister of Huangsha province and was seriously injured had spread throughout Diyu in just a few days. Emissaries from various powers rushed to Huangsha province, and Wu Qi did not want to be left behind. He left a celestial fiend puppet in Hai province and pretended to be seriously injured, while he went straight to Huangsha province. During the war, the officials of Diyu were very strict with the management of the teleportation formations. Wu Qi spent a lot of effort to get here through the teleportation formation. When he arrived at Huangshizhao, it had been 3 days and 4 nights since Liu Bang was assassinated. Wu Qi left the capital of Huangsha province in a hurry and rushed to the place where Liu Bang was assassinated at the fastest speed, Yueya City. Yueya City was the most important city in Huangsha province apart from the capital. It was also the city that was destroyed by the stars of Myriad Immortal Alliance more than a year ago. The city was extremely rich in resources, producing a large number of rare metals and minerals. It was one of the important raw materials for the military court of Diyu to forge all kinds of upper-grade weapons and armors, as well as countless large war machines. Therefore, hundreds of millions of people lived around Yueya City all year round, relying entirely on mining for their livelihood. The attack of the stars of Myriad Immortal Alliance had crushed hundreds of millions of people within thousands of miles around Yueya City. 60% of them were skilled miners and smelters, which had caused a devastating blow to the mining industry of Yueya City. Therefore, Huangsha province was the largest province in Diyu that contributed the most to the encirclement of immortals and itinerant cultivators. Even the military court of Liangzhu had stationed an elite army of 300,000 soldiers in Huangsha province, which was directly under the command of the human emperor, striving to wipe out all the immortals and itinerant cultivators in Huangsha province and the surrounding areas. In such an important place, it was reasonable for the angel Liu Bang to come to Yueya City to mediate. However, as soon as Liu Bang entered Yueya City, he was stabbed in the chest by Jing Imo, the left military minister of Huangsha province. Now his life was in danger, and his soul might scatter at any time. Such a big event immediately shook all sides of Diyu dynasty, and all kinds of people rushed to the scene. Wu Qi hurried through the boundless yellow sand with the innate escape method. He wanted to rush to Yueya City and see what kind of trick Liu Bang wanted to play. If he was not seriously injured, Wu Qi was ready to take the opportunity to seriously injure him. If he was really seriously injured, Wu Qi did not mind giving him a push, and even using the remote curse to teach his true spirit on the 8 Treasures Lotus platform a lesson. Of course, the 8 Treasures Lotus platform was the supreme treasure of the current Lord Buddha, and it was an innate spirit item born from a wisp of innate primal energy. It was very difficult to tamper with the 8 Treasures Lotus platform. But, even if he could not destroy Liu Bang's true spirit, Wu Qi wanted to teach him a lesson, and at the same time, annoy these cultivators of the Buddhist League. He had a bad feeling that the cultivators of the Buddhist League had colluded with the immortals from the heaven and were carrying out their plan on Pangu continent with great fanfare, which could very well endanger him. Not only Wu Qi himself, but also so many of his friends, brothers, relatives, and lovers. If he sat back and watched these people do whatever they wanted, the consequences would be very difficult to clean up. So, he had to do something. Even if I am a mayfly trying to shake an iron tree, I will do something. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and the thick earth element energy under the yellow sand within 100 miles quickly rushed into his body. Suddenly, the underground energy veins under him moved, and in the blink of an eye, Wu Qi was hundreds of millions of miles away. With the innate escape art found in the scroll of stealing and the Kwafu chasing the sun step being combined, Wu Qi could travel hundreds of millions of miles in a blink of an eye like a ghost, and without raising a single speck of dust, he came to Yueya City, located at the border of Huangsha province. Standing on the peak of a bronze-colored mountain, Wu Qi looked down at the surroundings. The mountain was over 100 miles tall, and the surrounding mountains stretched for an unknown distance. Even with the eyesight of Wu Qi's chaotic divine eyes, he could not see where the edge of the mountains was. To the west of Wu Qi, the mountains formed a huge crescent-shaped valley, and in the middle of the valley was a large blue lake, whose water was also crescent-shaped. Between the lake and the mountains, along with the flow of the mountains and the water, was where Yuya City used to be. But the star of Myriad Immortal Alliance had completely flattened Yuya City, and a huge gap had appeared in both the mountains and the lake, adding a strange and ferocious look to the originally harmonious scene. The place where Wu Qi was standing was the edge of the mountain range where the mountains had been destroyed. That day, the star had fallen near this place, shattering the mountains and collapsing the ground. Although Pangu Continent had the ability to repair itself, the terrain had changed. The mountains that stretched like a screen had turned into a rugged stone forest here. It was as if a large piece of the crescent-shaped mountain had been bitten off, and the lake had spread along the damaged terrain, filling the stone forest with water. Next to the new stone forest, a city that was obviously newly built stood between the mountains and the rivers, surrounded by barracks filled with a towering murderous aura. At least 100,000 soldiers were stationed here. Hundreds of flying ships of various sizes were hovering in the sky, and right above the city was a strange-looking pyramid made entirely of black stones, with a total of 3 steps from top to bottom. The base of the pyramid measured about 1 mile in both length and width, and stood about 2,000 feet tall. It was divided into 3 parts from top to bottom, each connected by a steep staircase. Hundreds of oracles from the Directorate of Celestials were sitting cross-legged at the edge of the pyramid, shrouded in a hazy halo, with vague shadows of ghosts and deities hovering motionlessly above their heads. Vaguely visible primordial runes flickered on the surface of the dark pyramid, emanating a terrible pressure that made one's heart palpitate. With just a glance at the pyramid, Wu Qi felt a chill run down his spine, as if there was a prehistoric beast hiding in it. It was a terrifying beast that killed people like scything flax. It was hiding in its lair and was probably sleeping, but the aura emanating from it made Wu Qi feel as if he had encountered his natural enemy. His muscles were all tensed up, and his heart was pounding madly. He could not wait to leave this place as soon as possible. Tao Buzan poked his head out of Wu Qi's clothes, spat out a tiny flame, and said in a low voice, "That damned flaming tiger. Lao Tzu has finally digested all his divine power. Damn it, why is it the aura of Yazi? In terms of seniority, Lao Tzu has to address their patriarch as uncle, so this should be a little cub that was born later, right?" Yazi? Wu Qi patted Ao Buzan on the head and said, "You mean there is a Yazi in that black pyramid?" Ao Buzan licked the corner of his mouth and murmured in a low voice, "This is clearly the Supreme Tower of Diyu's Directorate of Celestials, which proves that there is a Supreme Oracle guarding this place. How is this a pyramid? The tower has 3 grades, and this is a lower-grade Supreme Oracle. Kiste, an expert of the realm of Primordial Immortal." Chuckling, Ao Buzan said in a low voice, "A Supreme Oracle who has fused with the soul of a Yazi beast. Good heavens, he is also an expert who cultivates both magic and fleshly body. We can't afford to offend him, and it's best not to get close to him. An old fool like him who cultivates both magic and fleshly body but has reached the realm of Supreme Oracle is the biggest headache for those immortals of the Celestial Court and those bald donkeys of the Buddhist League. This old fellow in front of us can fight at least 3 immortals of the same realm as him at the same time." Wu Qi gave Ao Buzan a look of horror. An oracle or warrior who had cultivated both magic and fleshly body to the realm of Primordial Immortal could fight 3 immortals of the same realm at the same time. Sensing the shock in Wu Qi's heart, Ao Buzan began to count one by one. The soul of a Yazi beast is an expert of the realm of Primordial Immortal. His fleshly body is equivalent to a Primordial Immortal, and he can fight a Primordial Immortal head-on. Coupled with the Tao of ghost and deity he cultivates, the ghost god he worships is at least a Primordial Immortal. If he uses all these tricks one by one, he can easily deal with 3 immortals. Twitching his mouth, Ao Buzan nodded and said, "Of course, those 3 Primordial Immortals cannot have a Primordial Immortal artifact. Otherwise, a Primordial Immortal artifact would be equivalent to a Primordial Immortal who has cultivated successfully, and its power would be greater. If they have a Primordial Immortal artifact, the one who will be defeated will be this old fellow in front of us." Wu Qi nodded slowly. That was reasonable. After all, who was a primordial immortal? For a supreme oracle, even if he cultivated both magic and fleshly body, to be able to fight 3 immortals at the same time was not taking primordial immortals seriously. That was reasonable. Half of an immortal's strength was in his own immortal artifact, and having a primordial immortal artifact and not having one made a huge difference. Staring at the Black Supreme Tower, Wu Qi was wondering why there was such a powerful figure in this place. Suddenly, a faint blood mist drifted past Wu Qi's feet. Wu Qi quickly looked down and saw that the blood mist was actually a large, hazy flag, and a tall fiend figure was wrapped in it. The banner of Qiyu and this guy. Wu Qi's pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip. Chapter 6:18. The whistling wind rolled up countless grains of yellow sand, turning them into a murky sandstorm and rushing forward. Protected by the banner of Qiyu, Xiangyu transformed into a hazy blood mist and slowly moved forward in the sandstorm, approaching the newly built Yuya city step by step. All his attention was focused on the city and the military camp in front of him, and he did not notice that Wu Qi was standing on the peak of a mountain tens of miles above him, looking down at him. Frowning, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Great minds think alike. Both of us are eyeing Pangu continent, a fat piece of meat." He took a few deep breaths and circulated a wisp of chaotic energy across his cheeks, melting away the remaining wisp of Buddhist energy in his cheekbones. After that, Wu Qi transformed into a gust of wind and blended into the sandstorm, moving forward cautiously at a distance of less than 3 miles behind Xiangyu. Wu Qi was puzzled. What was Xiangyu doing here? And when did he come to Pangu continent? How many men did he bring? Did he bring the woman who Wu Qi could not forget? The sandstorm soon blanketed the city, and the shouts of generals could be heard coming from every corner of the military camp. The human warriors with strong fleshly bodies walked out of their tents and slapped long iron stakes into the ground to reinforce the tents. The strong wind brought a great deal of sand and dust and smacked the tents, causing them to tremble violently, while the iron stakes were pushed along by the strong wind and rattled noisily on the ground. Wu Qi followed Xiangyu and snuck into the camp. He watched as Xiangyu approached the back of a soldier who was reinforcing the tent, then broke the soldier's neck with ease. After that, he donned the soldier's armor and began strolling around the camp. Xiangyu was an expert in the art of military formations, and he was very familiar with all kinds of activities in the military camp. Now, in the sandstorm, the soldiers were all hiding in their tents and few came out. On top of that, Xiangyu possessed a strange and unfathomable demonic technique, which allowed him to travel in the strong wind at any time. With that, he easily circled around the camp, and even circled a few rounds in the newly built city. It seemed that he could not find the man he was looking for. Shaking his head discontentedly, he covered his aura with the banner of Qiyu and snuck out of the military camp again. But as soon as he stepped out of the military camp, a cold laugh came from the supreme tower in the sky. "Have you seen enough? If you have, then stay here." A strange whistling noise rang out as a plume of black smoke shot down from the supreme tower. Amidst the black smoke, a huge bony hand leaped out of it. It was about an acre in circumference, and with a suffocating pressure, it went straight towards Xiangyu and grabbed him with one swift move. Xiangyu gave a cold snort. His fleshly body suddenly swelled to hundreds of feet tall, then he threw a punch at the bony hand. A loud boom rang out, and a few sparks flew out from the bony hand. Xiangyu gave a muffled snort, and his fist was stained with blood, which sprayed hundreds of feet away. A wisp of dark mist seeped into his arm from his injured fist, quickly turning his fist and arm pitch black. Then, the dark mist began to spread along his arm and into his body. The dark mist kept making shrill squeaking noises, as if there were countless rats hiding in Xiangyu's arm, and were about to gnaw at it until only bones were left. Xiangyu staggered back dozens of steps, knocking his head against a sentry tower in front of the military camp's gate. The nearly 1,000 feet tall sentry tower crumbled to pieces. 5 soldiers on duty on the tower, led by a low-ranking officer, leaped down from the tower. 5 broadswords and 1 long sword transformed into 6 beams of cold light, thrusting straight at Xiang Yu's back. Wu Qi shook his head. Xiang Yu is still so impulsive. Does he think he can do whatever he wants in the enemy's camp just because he is protected by the banner of Qiyu? Wu Qi had never considered that this was the imperial army from Liangzhu, the capital city of Diyu, under the direct command of the human emperor. Even the weakest soldier in this army had the overall strength that was at least strong enough to fight against a body cultivator of heaven immortal realm. Xiang Yu's overall strength had just stepped into the realm of heaven immortal, and yet he dared to come here and do whatever he wanted? Sighing softly, Wu Qi moved his body forward, sliced open the void soundlessly, and appeared behind Xiang Yu. He pointed his finger out, and the star shark transformed into a clump of silvery green mist and shot out, enveloping the 6 soldiers. Countless tiny starlights spun and shot rapidly in the mist, piercing through the sturdy bodies of these soldiers. In just a blink of an eye, the power of stars condensed by the star shark had smashed the 6 soldiers to a pulp. Grabbing Xiang Yu with one hand, Wu Qi stomped his right foot on the ground and took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he had already brought Xiang Yu hundreds of millions of miles away. After taking 18 steps in a row, Wu Qi and Xiang Yu were already 3 provinces away. Suddenly, someone beside Wu Qi blew a light breath into Wu Qi and Xiang Yu's ears, and a hoarse and cold voice pierced into their ears like a steel needle. It is not easy to have such a level of attainment in the Quafu chasing the sun step. Which prince's subordinate are you? He. If you dare to offend me again, having your soul destroyed will be considered a light punishment. 2 muffled booms rang out, as both Wu Qi and Xiang Yu were severely wounded at the same time. Wu Qi's spine exploded with a boom, leaving a fist-sized bloody hole in front of his chest. At the same time, blood burst out of Xiang Yu's dantian and forehead. His dantian and spiritual ocean were severely wounded at the same time, and more than half of his magical power was gone. It almost knocked him down from the realm of heaven immortal to immortal. Wu Qi was scared out of his wits. He had taken 18 Quafu chasing the sun steps in a row, but the fearsome figure in the supreme tower had easily found him and Xiang Yu, and had even given them a warning and a small punishment. Fortunately, Wu Qi was using the Quafu chasing the sun step, a cultivation technique of the human race, which made the dreadful Supreme Oracle think that Wu Qi was from one of the powers in the Yu dynasty. Perhaps he had some scruples of his own, which was why he showed mercy to Wu Qi and Xiang Yu. He dared not imagine what would have happened if he had fled with Xiang Yu using an innate escape art, and the Supreme Oracle had found out that he was using an immortal art. Would he and Xiang Yu have been wiped out by the Supreme Oracle in the blink of an eye? The sharp rebuke just now had nearly shattered his innate divine soul, shattered his spine, and nearly ripped his body to shreds. Both of the injuries were so close to taking his life. Just a little bit of insignificant force was enough to destroy Wu Qi's soul, or completely destroy his fleshly body. This was the power of a supreme oracle. Wu Qi staggered a few steps forward and coughed out a mouthful of blood. His legs went limp, and he fell heavily to the ground. Xiang Yu was in an even worse state. His dantian and forehead were severely injured at the same time, and his eyes were rolling backward, with blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. His magic power was out of control under his skin, wriggling here and there like countless earthworms. It was a horrible sight to see. Shivering, Wu Qi got to his feet. Ignoring Xiang Yu's condition, he sat cross-legged on the ground and began to silently exercise the healing technique found in the true body of heaven and earth scripture. A purple rune that looked like it was forged of crystal emerged in front of Wu Qi. Countless wisps of purple mist that could only be sensed by mystic arts, and could not be detected by naked eyes or divine sense, rushed out from under Pangu continent and rushed into Wu Qi's body. His shattered spine was rapidly regenerating, and one white bone after another was reforming his shattered skin and flesh at a speed visible to the naked eye. After more than 2 hours, Wu Qi sprung to his feet. His fleshly body had been repaired, and the healing power of the true body of heaven and earth scripture was amazing. Waving his fists and kicking his legs, he walked up to Xiangyu and stuffed a few soul-nourishing and life-saving spirit pills into the mouth of Xiangyu, who was on the brink of death. Xiangyu's body trembled slightly, and he finally woke up from his coma. He coughed violently, coughing a few clots of dried blood from his throat. Before he could see Wu Qi's face clearly, he cried out in a deep voice, "I am Xiangyu, the hegemon king of Western Chu. Thank you for saving my life today, my benefactor. I will repay you handsomely in the future." As the voice rang out, Xiangyu raised his head and recognized Wu Qi's face at first glance, which was slightly deformed by Mao Nizhu's heavy blow. "Great Yan's Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi?" Xiangyu was stunned, then he asked word by word. His tone had become extremely cold, as if the words were dug out from a 10,000-year-old glacier, making Wu Qi shudder involuntarily. "Long time no see, hegemon king of Western Chu." With a smile on his face, Wu Qi cupped his fist and greeted Xiangyu. Xiangyu let out a few strange laughs in a deep voice. Suddenly he leaped up into the air, and when he had just jumped 10 feet into the air, a pitch-black spear appeared in his hand. With a loud roar of a tiger, he thrust the spear straight towards Wu Qi's throat. A loud cracking noise rang out, as a purple electric arc burst out from the spear, thrusting towards Wu Qi's body like a giant serpent. Wu Qi stood still in front of Xiangyu with his hands clasped behind his back. The electric arc smashed accurately onto Wu Qi's body, ripping Wu Qi's clothes to shreds. Like a dragon, the electric arc smashed viciously onto Wu Qi's body, shattering into countless tiny electric arcs and scattering in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the pitch-black spear was pointed right at Wu Qi's throat. The spear bent abruptly, and with his eyes bloodshot, Xiangyu howled as he thrust the spear forward with all his might. A crisp sound rang out, and the spear exploded. With a muffled groan, Xiangyu was sent flying hundreds of feet away. His hands were badly mutilated by the broken spear handle, and he staggered back dozens of steps before falling heavily on one knee on the ground. "Bastard!" Xiangyu roared furiously, pointing his finger at Wu Qi and saying, "I'm going to pull out your tendons, peel off your skin, eat your flesh, and use your soul as a lampwick so that you will never be able to reincarnate." Aobuzan wiggled his body and crawled onto Wu Qi's shoulder. He glanced at Wu Qi, then at Xiangyu, and said in a professional tone, "You killed his father and stole his wife. You're not as old as him, so I'm sure you didn't kill his father, but stealing his wife. That's for sure. You've hooked up with his woman, haven't you? Hurry up and kill him. Kill his husband, steal his wife, and let his child call you his father. How great would that be?" Wu Qi almost coughed out a mouthful of blood. He glared at Aobuzan, grabbed him by the neck, and shoved him into his sleeve. Sighing softly, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Xiangyu and said, "You can't blame me for that." Xiangyu glared at Wu Qi and was about to roar, but he suddenly froze and clenched his teeth. A few cracking sounds rang out, and many of his teeth were broken. Then he snorted coldly at Wu Qi and said, "From now on, don't ever show your face in front of Lao Tzu again. Or else, even if your cultivation base is 10,000 times stronger than Lao Tzu will still kill you." Xiangyu took a deep breath and slowly rose to his feet, fixing his blood-red eyes at Wu Qi. After a long time, he suddenly transformed into a beam of blood-red light and shot up into the sky, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Wu Qi stared at Xiangyu's fleeing beam in horror. This is not him. This is definitely not his style," he said in astonishment. Before his voice could fade away, a dark shadow suddenly emerged from the void behind him, and a cold gleam shot soundlessly toward the back of Wu Qi's head. Chapter 619. Wu Qi shook his head and said with a cold grin, "That camp belongs to us. What does it have to do with you, fellow Taoist Han?" Laughing wildly, Han Exen flashed his body and shot out dozens of extremely thin beams of cold light from both hands towards Wu Qi's face. The beams of cold light were silent. Around Wu Qi, dozens of Xianbing crystal walls kept rushing out, but they were all shattered by the beams of cold light. For a moment, it was as if a peerless zither player was plucking the strings of a pipa with his fingers. The air was filled with a clear and melodious tune. The crystal walls were shattered, and a large sheet of cold air spread out in all directions. Countless palm-sized, hexagonal snowflakes, as thin as cicadas' wings, fell down from the sky at high speed, plunging towards Han Exen like a rain of blades and arrows. As the beams of cold light approached Wu Qi at high speed, Han Exen cried out in a low voice, "This is the 7-killing stab, refined from the essence of the 7-killing star. Nothing in this world can stop it. Enjoy the wonderful feeling of having this killing power enter your body." The sky was filled with killing intent, and the morale was as strong as steel. The strong aura of an army made Wu Qi's body feel very uncomfortable. Hurriedly, he exercised all kinds of soul-protecting mystic arts found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture to stabilize his soul. Letting out a long breath, Wu Qi nodded to Han Exen and said, "Oh, fellow Taoist Han. Hee, it must have been hard for you to track me all the way from Huangsha province to here." Wu Qi snorted coldly. The Xianbing rose into the sky and fiercely charged towards Han Exen. The aura of a battlefield emanating from Han Exen's eyes grew stronger and stronger. Vaguely, he could hear the battle cries of countless soldiers, the noises of blades, spears, swords, and halberds cutting flesh and bones, the rumbling of war drums, and the thunderous galloping of horses. An extremely fierce and brave aura rose from the ground. Vaguely, a mist of blood burst out from around Han Exen, and suddenly, a large crimson star emerged behind him. Han Exen slowly lowered his body, and specks of cold light gradually appeared in his palms. He sneered in a low voice and said, "Looks like you're not willing to tell me your purpose for coming here. Forget it, I'll chop off your limbs and collect your soul. I'll find the answer myself. Heh, you really shouldn't have gotten involved in this matter." The star shark refined by Wu Qi could also gather starlight and turn it into an indestructible star aurora that could shoot out and injure people. This kind of strange magical power that was tempered by starlight collided with the 7-killing stab, and they were a good pair of opponents. The specks of starlight shattered, and the 7-killing stinger, which was originally flying at an incredible speed, was also hit by the starlight, and its flying speed suddenly decreased by more than 100 times. Black shadow. It was indeed a black shadow. This shadow was like a person's shadow that suddenly stood upright under the sun. It was so dark that it seemed as if it had been smeared with countless black lacquers. There were no facial features to speak of at all. Even though Wu Qi's chaos divine eyes were powerful, he couldn't see through this man's face. Obviously, this man had some kind of extremely strange magic, or had been shielding his body and sense of power with a secret treasure. A strange weapon made from the original starlight of the 7-killing star? Staring at the black shadow for quite a while, Wu Qi abruptly laughed out and said, "Who do you think you are? You said that you can turn my body into meat paste, but can you really kill me? Why are you cowering? Are you too ashamed to see the others? Come on, let me see how powerful you are." Clang. The star shark quaked intensely, and Han Exen was forced back for a few steps. Han Exen looked at Wu Qi and growled in a deep voice, "I am Han Exen, a soldier." Snorting coldly, Wu Qi's body suddenly transformed into a puff of devil power and dissipated. The cold beam of light penetrated the devil power transformed from Wu Qi and spun in the air for tens of circles, but failed to locate Wu Qi's power. Helplessly, it could only transform into a beam of cold light and fly back, falling into the hand of the man who suddenly showed up in the air. Han Exen narrowed his eyes. The blood-red light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. He said coldly, "Why do you pretend to be ignorant? Since you went to Huangsha province, don't you know that our emperor was attacked by an assassin in Huangsha province, and we don't know whether he's still alive or not? We all know what you're going to do there. Why do you need to hide it with lies?" Han Exen just kept moving quickly around Wu Qi, his body flickering and flashing in the air like a ghost, appearing here and there from time to time. Dozens of cold beams of light kept piercing around Wu Qi, shattering the Xianbing crystal wall, and shattering the snowflakes falling from the sky when Han Exen shook his body, shattering them into ice crystals and scattering in all directions. My fellow Taoist, why did you attack me for no reason? Staring at the dark figure, Wu Qi let out an unpleasant laugh. A cold gleam flickered in the dark figure's palm as he pointed his finger at Wu Qi and said, "It does have something to do with me. Is that man called Xiangyu? I've been following him all the way here, and judging by his appearance, he looks like an old friend of mine. Is he Xiangyu?" Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then shook his head and said, "What does it have to do with you whether I know him or not?" The pitch-black fiend energy was gathering inwardly, and Wu Qi had reappeared. When he was reforming his body, he had made some minor changes to his face, height, the thickness of his arms, the size of his waist, and many other details. But these minor changes had made him look like a completely different person and had nothing to do with Wu Qi at all. On top of that, Wu Qi had purposely released a strange aura from his body, which was the prime energy essence of the ancient mystifying hag from the Pearl of the Shun, filled with a strange power that could confuse one's mind. Layers of ice walls, as thin as a cicada's wings and measuring a few miles in circumference, emerged before the cold gleam. It was the strongest defensive divine ability found in the Dark-Een Water scripture, but they were shattered by the cold gleam one after another. Amidst a silvery cracking noise, the cold gleam shattered 33 layers of ice walls in a row, piercing straight into Wu Qi's chest with a killing intent that nearly froze Wu Qi's marrow. "This is the armor of Greedy Wolf, and this is the sword of Vanquisher, the weapons I forged by gathering the essence of Greedy Wolf and Vanquisher. Taoist, spare your life." Wu Qi was talking nonsense with his eyes wide open. He stared blankly at the shadow and said with a frown, "Xiangyu? What is that for you?" Wu Qi feigned ignorance and asked in a cold voice. The shadow paused, then slowly circled around Wu Qi, shook his head and said, "It can't be Xiangyu. Years ago, he committed suicide in River Wu, and his fleshly body and soul were refined by Zhang Zifeng with the central extreme yellow devil suppressing heavenly thunder. His soul is gone, so how could he still be here? It seems that I have been too suspicious." Han Exen smiled faintly and said coolly, "I am very sensitive to the smell of blood. The man you saved had a strong blood aura emanating from his body, so I had no choice but to catch up with you. Tell me honestly, why did you intrude the army camp? I can let you die in one piece." Both men glanced at each other. While they were about to strike again, a strong stench of rotting corpses suddenly came from the surrounding air. Along with a few cracking noises, the cold gleam pierced through the 7 little fiends Wu Qi had pointed out, then pierced straight into Wu Qi's chest in an arc. Wu Qi gave a slight cry of surprise. His body spun rapidly like a wild wind, and a hazy white mist sprayed out from his body. Within the white mist, one could vaguely see a boundless snowfield and an immeasurably large iceberg. A frigid gust of wind blew out from the mist, turning the area 100 miles in circumference around Wu Qi into a world of ice and snow. The shadow gave a strange laugh, shook his head and said, "Although it is not Xiangyu, why did he come to the army camp in the middle of the night? And why did you save him? Tell me the whole story now, or else I'll definitely turn your flesh and bones into a puddle of mud and scatter your soul into nothingness." The shadow looked at Wu Qi from head to toe for a long while, then nodded slowly and said, "It might not be without a reason. You know that man just now?" The shadow paused for a brief moment, then he suddenly laughed coldly. The dark mist that enveloped his body slid down from his body like a stream of water, transforming into a faint shadow that merged with the shadow under his feet. Wu Qi was taken aback. The man was clad in a tight black armor, tall and handsome. He was none other than the deputy of Liu Bang, Han Exen, whom Wu Qi had met a few months ago. A wolf howl rose into the sky. The black armor on Han Exen's body shone with a dazzling, cold light. A silhouette of a wolf could be vaguely seen behind Han Exen's back. He rushed towards Wu Qi at top speed, holding a strange-shaped longsword in each of his hands, and hacked towards Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi had only taken a glance at the large red star, which was full of sharp edges, when his divine soul felt as if it had been heavily cut by a knife. He gave a muffled snort. He felt a hot sensation in his nose, and a large amount of blood flowed down from his nostrils. The fierce killing intent that had just smashed into his body slowly flowed out of his body along with the blood. Wu Qi stared at Han Xian in shock. He had only taken a glance at the large star that had emerged from the blood mist behind Han Xian, but his divine soul was already wounded. What exactly was the origin of this large star? Wu Qi stared at the dark shadow. So, this man had been following them all the way from the Yuya city's barracks? The Supreme Oracle in the Supreme Tower had all kinds of mystic techniques and divine abilities, and he was an almighty expert of the realm of primordial immortal. It was understandable that he could track them with his divine sense. Although Wu Qi did not leave any trace of his aura, Xiangyu had left behind a trace of the smell of blood. It was his fate to be chased all the way here. But this dark shadow had been following them all the way here, and still managed to find them so accurately across 3 provinces. This was an incredible ability. 36 tall figures, each about 30 feet tall and wrapped in white bandages like mummies and emitting a strong stench of corpses, emerged out of thin air. Without uttering a single word, they leaped towards Wu Qi and Han Xian. A cold light shot over and arrived behind Wu Qi in a blink of an eye. After Wu Qi began to practice the true body of heaven and earth scripture, his fleshly body had developed a very mysterious divine ability. Before his divine soul could react, his fleshly body had automatically shifted to the side and pointed out a finger backhandedly. As soon as the finger was pointed out, the void within about a foot in circumference in front of the fingertip suddenly cracked and cracked open, from which came shooting out an immense cold air. "Do you know the man who turned into a blood beam and fled just now?" asked the dark shadow in a deep voice. At this moment, Han Xian's eyes were bloodshot, emitting a 1-foot-long blood-red light. Vaguely, a boundless battlefield could be seen in the blood-red light screen, where countless soldiers were charging forward with all kinds of weapons in their hands. Standing in front of Han Xian, Wu Qi felt an extremely fierce and murderous aura coming at him, as if hundreds of millions of mighty soldiers were charging at him. Even with his current cultivation base, Wu Qi could not help but sway and almost stumble backward. After a moment of silence, Wu Qi slowly took dozens of steps back. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Along with a long and shrill cry, the star shark darted out from between his brows, transforming into a huge green shark shadow that swished across the sky. Specks of starlight converged in the long rainbow brought up by the star shark, clashing with the 7 killing needles and producing a deafening boom. The cold air condensed into 7 tiny ghost heads, clashing with the 7 killing needles and clashing with each other, producing a deafening roar. Chapter 620. A strange noise rang out as a huge palm slapped down towards the top of Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi gave a loud cry, and a 3-inch thick Xianbing wall appeared above his head. When the palm slapped on the Xianbing wall, a large sheet of dense, dark green smoke sprayed out from the palm, while the Xianbing wall let out a shrill squeaking noise, as if ice water was poured on a red-hot iron block. The noise made Wu Qi's ears ache and his heart itch. In just a fraction of a second, the smoke from the palm corroded the Xianbing wall, and the huge palm continued slapping down towards Wu Qi. Wu Qi was shocked. Although he was only a peak-stage heaven immortal now, the Xianbing wall in the Darkeen Water Scripture was a top-notch defensive divine ability, capable of freezing all kinds of poisonous gases and poison waters, and had a great restraining effect on all kinds of evil things. Yet, such a miraculous divine ability was actually restrained by the dark green smoke. What exactly were these 36 things that emitted the stench of rotting corpses? Not daring to take the palm strike head-on, Wu Qi swayed his body and dodged the palm strike like a swimming fish. A loud boom rang out in the surroundings. 36 sturdy figures wrapped in white cloths waved their hands at the same time and performed a strange incantation gesture. Then, a shrill, unpleasant incantation rang out in the air, and in the next moment, countless 10 feet wide and long white cloths shot over from all directions, quickly intertwining into a spherical space with a diameter of several tens of miles, wrapping Wu Qi, Han Xian, and the 36 monsters at the same time. Wu Qi felt his vision turn dark, and then he found himself trapped in a strange space that was pitch black, with nothing but specks of phosphorescent ghost fire drifting across it. He opened his chaotic divine eyes, but he could only see about 100 miles ahead. Beyond that was a vast expanse of dark mist, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not see what was behind it. Next to him, Han Exen, clad in the armor of greed, was vigilantly releasing the 7-killing Stinger and Vanquisher to circle around him, illuminating an area hundreds of feet in circumference with a faint glow. Formation! Wu Qi said to Han Exen in a deep voice. Han Exen took 2 steps closer to Wu Qi, gritting his teeth and saying, "Your enemy?" Wu Qi rolled his eyes and immediately put the blame on Han Exen. "Nonsense. I've been cultivating in seclusion in His Excellency's mansion for many years, and I've never had any dealings with those itinerant cultivators of Pangu continent. How could he be my enemy? But you, Han Exen, as the deputy of the celestial emissary, there must be countless people who want you dead, right?" Just now, when the Supreme Oracle in the Supreme Tower mistook Wu Qi as a sinecure in some king's mansion, Wu Qi immediately put the blame on himself. Then he quickly put the blame on Han Exen. "These people are here to cause you trouble. As the deputy of Liu Bang, how could there be no one who wants to cause you trouble when Liu Bang is assassinated?" Han Exen's face flickered. He gave Wu Qi a look and said coldly, "You are trapped here as well." Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then raised a finger and said, "Give me 1,000 upper-grade immortal stones, and some spirit pills or other natural treasures that I can use. I swear on my inner demons that I will do my best to help you break out of the formation." Han Exen was taken aback. He gave Wu Qi a death stare and said through clenched teeth, "If you can get out of here, of course I'll give you something good." Wu Qi said smoothly, "I won't release the eagle until I see the rabbit. If you don't give me anything good, you can stay here and deal with this formation." Han Exen had never seen someone like Wu Qi who would take advantage of the situation. Gritting his teeth in anger, he pointed at his weapon and said in a ferocious voice, "You? Fine, which king sent you here? Tell me the name of that man, and the rest can be discussed." Wu Qi just smiled and said nothing. All of a sudden, a bone-chilling wind began to blow around them, rolling up dense black smoke that looked like a spider web and gradually approaching them. Figures could be seen amidst the black smoke, and vaguely, tall monsters could be seen approaching them step by step. Beside these monsters, there were some hazy and indistinct existences that constantly exuded a chilly and evil aura. These unknown existences constantly let out soft cries. When the cries entered one's ears, it was like the cries of a child's mother, causing one to have the urge to respond. Soul-snatching tune. Wu Qi quickly performed a hand incantation gesture, and a primordial rune that twisted like a spirit snake took shape between his fingers, quickly entering his ears. Looking at Han Exen, Wu Qi smiled and said, "Do not answer their cries, or your soul may be sucked away by some unknown existence at any time. I don't think I need to explain to you what kind of divine abilities these extraterrestrial fiends possess, do I?" Chuckling, Wu Qi shook his head at Han Exen, sighed and said, "As for asking me to betray His Highness, that is absolutely impossible." After a brief moment of silence, Han Exen pointed at his own ears. Immediately, Wu Qi performed another hand incantation gesture and sent a soul-concentrating seal into Han Exen's ears. The soul-concentrating seal was one of the primordial runes, which could stabilize one's soul and condense one's divine sense, preventing one's divine sense from being shaken by external evils. The Tao of primordial runes was extremely mysterious, and with Wu Qi's current magical power, even someone who was 100 times stronger than him would not be able to suck away his soul with an evil technique. Sensing that he was no longer attracted by the faintly discernible cries in the formation, Han Exen fixed his gaze at Wu Qi, then fished out a palm-sized storage bag from under his sleeve and threw it over to Wu Qi. He cried out in a deep voice, "There are 3,000 upper-grade immortal stones, 100 bottles of spirit medicines produced by Tusita Palace in the Celestial Court, and several hundred spirit items of various kinds in there. Help me get out of this formation, and all these are yours." Gladly, Wu Qi put the storage bag glinting with a 5-colored immortal glow into his sleeve. Then he raised his right hand and swore that he would do his best to protect Han Xian from the formation. After that, he spat out Star Shark and waved both palms, unleashing a large sheet of purple-green flame. Like a melted glass, the divine flame of order spread out in all directions. Wherever the purple and green-colored flame swept across, those vague and indistinct existences hiding in the darkness would let out shrill howls, as they were all turned into nothingness by the flame. An enormous amount of pure soul source energy kept rushing into his body, causing Wu Qi's innate divine soul to grow rapidly once again. He took a long and comfortable breath. The chaotic energy kept transforming into the divine flame of order. In just the time of one breath, 30% of the chaotic energy in Wu Qi's body had been transformed into the divine flame of order. Suddenly, Wu Qi performed a lotus-shaped incantation gesture on his chest. On his fingertip, a ball of purple-green flame, about 10 feet in diameter, was burning fiercely, emanating a threatening heat that forced Han Xian to take a few steps back. Damn it! Purple and green, the divine flame of order that specializes in hurting fiends from the outer domains. Han Xian fixed his eyes on the ball of flame on Wu Qi's fingertip and cried out in a low voice. Even those few great emperors could not control an innate divine flame of this level. Who is this guy? How could he have such an opportunity? After pondering for a brief moment, Han Xian suddenly grinned coldly and said, "He is indeed from the imperial clan of Diyu. Hee. Apart from Pangu continent, where else can I find an innate divine flame that can be easily absorbed? The information provided by the few celestial lords is indeed accurate. Some of the princes from the imperial clan of Diyu are serving immortal cultivators, and some of their men have even sneaked into the celestial court. What they said is true." With a deep cry, Wu Qi forced all the other flames out of his body, except for a tiny wisp of flame, and compressed them into a fireball, about the size of a human head, in front of his chest. It was purple-green in color, and no heat could be sensed from it. All its power was condensed into a fireball. The divine flame of order had been compressed to the limit that Wu Qi could reach now. From the inside to the outside, it was clearly divided into 3 layers, and the core layer had been compressed into a liquid state. Die! Wu Qi gave a deep cry and waved his right hand. The fireball shot out and smashed into the ground hundreds of feet away. A loud boom rang out, and a great sheet of purple-green flame sprayed violently in all directions. Pillars of flame, about 1,000 feet tall, rose from the ground and swept away the dark smoke and chilly wind in the surroundings. More unknown existences were burned into nothingness amidst the raging flame. An enormous soul force kept pouring into Wu Qi's divine soul, causing him to gasp for breath. It took him a lot of effort to withstand the severe pain brought by the rapid growth of his divine soul. The flame swept across 1,000 miles in circumference, wiping out all the fiend gods who kept making faint cries. However, 36 tall figures were still approaching Wu Qi and his companions, one step at a time. These eerie figures were shrouded in a layer of dense white light. The purple-green flame kept burning the white light, shattering it layer by layer, but new white light kept emerging. Many times, when the purple-green flame had approached their bodies, a large sheet of dark green mist would rush out and push the divine flame a few feet away. After that, new white light would burst out from their bodies. Han Xian gasped and said, "Mystic skeleton spirit gathering fiend armor talisman, at least 100 of them have been used. This is definitely the mystic skeleton spirit gathering fiend armor talisman made by a sun oracle. Bastard. Who is spending so much money to kill me?" Han Xian was misled by Wu Qi, thinking that these monsters were coming for him. Furthermore, when he saw the white light that kept bursting out from these monsters, Han Xian could no longer control the killing intent in his heart. He threw his head back and let out a sharp cry, then shot out the 7 killing needles with a cold gleam. Even Wu Qi was shocked by what he saw. In the Directorate of Celestials, Mystic Skeleton Spirit Gathering Fiend Armor Talisman could be made by Star-Grade Junior Oracles, Sun-Grade Great Oracles, and even Supreme Oracles. However, different people made different talismans, as the materials they needed and the power they could unleash were different. The Mystic Skeleton Spirit Gathering Fiend Armor Talisman made by a Sun-Grade Great Oracle could withstand at least a few full-force attacks from a peak-level Heaven Immortal, and the materials used were even more expensive. On top of that, the Sun-Grade Great Oracle had to spend a lot of effort and physical strength to make these talismans, and they might even lose a few days of their lifespan. Therefore, Fiend Armor Talismans of this level were extremely rare. Even if they did exist, they were usually kept by the elders of those big clans as protective items. However, when these monsters were burned by the divine flame of order, dazzling white light kept bursting out from their bodies, and every time the white light shattered, a Fiend Armor Talisman was destroyed. In just a few breaths of time, at least 100 Fiend Armor Talismans made by Sun-Grade Great Oracles had been destroyed. The cost was simply too high. Watching Han Exen rush out like a mad bull, Wu-Chi could not help but grin coldly. What is wrong with this Han Exen? Isn't he known as the General of Wisdom? Why is it so hard for him to control himself now? Hehe, it's not bad to have Han Exen as my fighter. You meow, is this your revenge? The strange thing is, how did you find my true form? Chapter 621. His killing intent towered into the sky. Right when Han Exen dashed out, 3 large stars soared up from behind his back, emitting a dazzling starlight that illuminated the surroundings. One of the large stars had countless edges and corners, which was the 7-killing star. One was pitch black like a black hole, which was the greedy wolf star, and the last one was crimson like blood, which contained countless wronged souls, which was the vanquisher star. With these 3 stars gathered, it was the matchless power of the vanquisher wolf star. The 7 killing needles shot through the air with a cold gleam that stretched over 1,000 feet in length, smashing onto the 36 gigantic figures like a thunderstorm. White beams kept bursting out and shattering, producing thunderous booms that shook Han Exen's body and made him tremble violently. The greedy wolf armor on his body emitted an eerie gleam, while the 2 vanquisher swords flew out and slashed, producing several thousand sword beams that swept across all directions. 36 monstrous figures surrounded Han Exen, slapping and smashing him with their huge palms. Each of their attacks could topple a great mountain and dry up an ocean. A dense dark green poisonous smoke spread in all directions as Han Exen fought fiercely with these monstrous figures. Wu-Chi pretentiously took out a few lower-grade immortal stones to replenish his energy, and in just the time of a few breaths, he had completely absorbed all the immortal energy contained in the immortal stones, transforming them into chaotic energies to replenish the energy he had consumed just now. He did not continue unleashing the divine flame of order. Instead, he waved both hands at Chi-Chi. His left hand was performing an incantation gesture and reciting an incantation. Numerous primordial runes that contain the power of earth, water, fire, wind, and many other elements of thunder roared out, transforming into a large energy storm that smashed and collided with the 36 monstrous figures. Meanwhile, large sheets of blue cold gleams kept shooting out from his right palm, as the soul-freezing immortal thunder, a mystic thunder technique found in the Dark Een Water scripture, was unleashed in quick succession, hitting the monstrous figures and causing their bodies to flicker violently with cold air. Han Exen was fighting desperately at the front, making him an excellent meat shield. The strength of his fleshly body was so strong that even Wu-Chi was struck speechless by it. He met the palms of the 36 strange shadows head-on with his fists, and each of his punches carried a force that could break the heavens, forcing the huge shadows back. The gust of wind from his fists contained an extremely brutal killing intent from the battlefield. When the murderous aura washed over the dark green poisonous smoke, it turned into green smoke and dissipated. With such a good meat shield in front of him, Wu-Chi, who was originally the main character, gained a huge advantage. He only cared about using all kinds of spells to easily attack these huge monstrous shadows. For the time being, he did not need to worry about his own defense. The star shark blade was hovering around him, transforming into a silver cyan spiritual light that was wandering around. Every now and then, it would let out a few high-pitched screeches and shoot out large amounts of starlight that looked like rubies and sapphires. After a full hour, one of the strange shadows was finally hit by Wu Qi's several dozens of ice soul and soul-splitting immortal thunders in a row. The fiend armor talisman it carried was completely depleted, and 3 thunderbolts smashed onto its body at the same time. Along with a series of cracking noises, a cold power that was strong enough to freeze even diamonds into ice crystals struck into the monster's body along with the thunder power. The white cloth wrapped around the monster's body was torn apart one after another, exposing the gigantic body that was wrapped under the white cloth. Wu Qi could not help but suck in a cold breath. These huge shadows looked extremely ferocious. Wu Qi reckoned they were made from the corpses of longbow men, as the chest and abdomen of all these corpses were filled with some kind of unknown filler, which should be some kind of herbal paste. Amidst the sticky, green, translucent paste, a strange heart the size of a human head was beating violently. Hundreds of black and red veins were growing out of the heart, connected to the strange shadow's body, pumping ceaselessly, sending a strong force into the strange shadow's body at all times. Their huge bodies were shriveled and ugly, their muscles tightly bunched up, and their muscle fibers could be seen clearly. They looked like dried toads, emanating an indescribable cruelty and evilness. Their facial features were deformed. Their eye sockets were filled with red crystals, and their noses and lips were cut off. Their sharp teeth were a few inches long, as sharp as blades. They did not look like the teeth of a human, but the organs of some wild beasts. 3 ice soul and soul-splitting immortal thunders from Wu Qi struck the hideous monster at the same time, immediately covering its body with a thick layer of xianbing. The monster's movement slowed down abruptly, allowing Han Xen to lunge forward like a mad tiger, swinging the pair of swords whistling through the air. Dozens of sword beams hacked and hacked on the monster's body, chopping off its limbs and head. Dark blood splashed and sprayed in all directions, twisting in the air like poisonous snakes. Together with the broken limbs, they danced in the air for a few moments. Suddenly, the blood shrank inwards, and the broken limbs and head flew back to their original positions at the same time, reattaching themselves to the monster's body. A blood-red light flashed, and the wounds were healed. Then, the monster casually slapped heavily on Han Xian's back. Han Xian, who thought he had killed the monster and exposed his back to the monster, gave a muffled snort and staggered a few steps forward. The power of this palm strike was at least 10 times stronger than the one Han Xian used to fight against them just now. Fortunately, Han Xian was wearing the greedy wolf armor, an immortal item defensive armor, which prevented the poisonous gas from penetrating into Han Xian's body. However, the tremendous force of the palm strike still made Han Xian see stars, and he felt a severe pain in his spine, as if it were about to break. "Bastard! What is this thing?" Han Xian cursed aloud, spraying countless water droplets towards Wu Qi. "My vanquisher carries the killing intent of the stars in the sky, and can kill all living beings in this world. But why is this thing unharmed after being hit by my sword?" Wu Qi coughed and said coolly, "If this thing doesn't have any life force, how could fellow Taoist Han kill it with your sword?" Han Xian was taken aback, then he gave a furious roar. The 3-colored starlight shone brightly around him. He swung his sword quickly in the air, unleashing 36 dark runes that looked like wolf heads, shooting towards the 36 monsters in a row, bringing up a dazzling light that was over 1,000 feet long. He grinned hideously and said, "Who said I can't kill them if they don't have any life force? Even if they are ghosts, I want them to die again. Greedy wolf slaughtering the world? Ultimate curse." As Han Xian let out a loud shout, the white light on these monsters finally faded away. The wolf head-shaped runes smashed heavily onto their bodies and instantly sank into their bodies. Suddenly, a great amount of starlight sprinkled down from the dark sky. All kinds of starlight fell onto the bodies of these monsters, spinning quickly on their bodies like sharp blades. Pieces of broken flesh and bones kept falling from these monsters' bodies, but they were quickly sucked back into their bodies by streams of black blood. In just a moment, the killing and recovery had reached a magical balance. Seeing that Han Xin was using a mystic technique to deal with these monsters, the speed of the runes and thunderbolts in Wu Qi's hands suddenly slowed down. Han Xin shouted angrily at Wu Qi, "What are you still doing there? Why don't you cooperate with me and kill them now?" Wu Qi smiled faintly. Casually, he pointed out several dozens of primordial runes, forming layers of earth, water, fire, and wind restrictive spells around himself. After that, he continued to unleash more thunderbolts and fire, smashing the bodies of these monsters and covering their broken bodies with xianbing. The bone-piercing cold seemed to have a great effect on weakening the incredible recovery ability of these monsters. When Wu Qi struck seriously, the broken bodies of these monsters could no longer fly back to their bodies, and many pieces of flesh and bones fell to the ground. Han Xin was wild with joy. Laughing out loud, he wielded the vanquisher, like an apprentice chopping dumplings in a restaurant. The two swords brought up tens of thousands of sword beams and fell onto the bodies of these monsters like raindrops, shredding their bodies into pieces. Bolts of icy soul and soul-splitting immortal thunderbolts kept rumbling out, freezing the broken bodies of these monsters and their strange recovery ability completely. Working together, Wu Qi and Han Xin finally managed to chop these monsters into pieces, turning them into a pile of broken flesh and blood. Right at this moment, a faintly discernible sneer suddenly rang out. Defective goods are just defective goods. Their lethality is not that great, and their recovery ability is restrained by the cold. Hee, next time if you don't give me the best, I won't even bother to help you old bastards. Han Xin suddenly snorted coldly and cried out, "It's here! Found it!" He dropped the vanquisher and abruptly produced a silver-white immortal talisman in his hand. He bit his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto the talisman. Immediately, a large sheet of immortal light that looked like melted glass sprayed out of the talisman. Within the light, a hazy figure emerged. The man slowly pulled his bow open, nocked an arrow, and released the arrow, aiming at the direction Han Xin was pointing at. 7 kills, vanquisher, greedy wolf. Combine the 3 stars into one, and slay all immortals with an arrow. Han Xin snapped. Starlight of 3 colors shot out from the top of his head and attached itself to the arrow, transforming into a beam of light that was about 10 feet thick as it shot toward a certain spot in the dark void. "You sneaky bastard! Come out and die!" cried Han Xin. "Hee, I have 360 tortures for you to enjoy. Let's see who dares to plot against me behind my back." The beam of light darted forward, piercing through countless layers of dark smoke. All of a sudden, a cloud of green smoke burst out of the void, and then a huge skull emerged. The skull sprayed out a large sheet of ghost fire, which collided with the tricolored beam of light. A loud boom rang out as the immortal talisman in Han Xion's hand suddenly burst into a silver flame and turned into a wisp of smoke in a blink of an eye. The tricolored beam of light suddenly expanded by more than 1,000 times, surging forward like the tide of the Qiantang River. The huge skull let out a shrill howl, then abruptly shattered into countless broken pieces of bone that fell down from the sky along with dense black smoke. Amidst the sound of ripping cloth, countless pieces of white cloth fluttered down from the sky, and a sheet of sunlight sprinkled down. The formation that had trapped Wu Qi and Han Xion a moment ago had been shattered by the mighty power unleashed by Han Xion's immortal talisman. Wu Qi frowned and suddenly shrunk his body, transforming into a tiny speck of dust and burrowing into the dense underbrush under the ground. A creepy laughter came from the air. That voice said, "You received money from others, so you have to help others deal with disasters. Little kid, you are going to die today. Hiske, your fleshly body is very strong as well. No wonder you've cultivated the true body of heaven and earth scripture to the 9 stars realm of the first Panga heaven. It's a good material to refine a law corpse. Hiske, where did you get these magical items that are filled with killing intent? You're really awesome." Wu Qi, who had transformed into a speck of dust, was amused, while Han Exen suddenly leaped to his feet in a rage. What true body of heaven and earth scripture? I'm Han Exen, the deputy emissary under the command of Liu Bang, the king of Han, who is cultivating the true body of heaven and earth scripture. Han Exen hurriedly turned his head back in anger, but found that Wu Qi had long disappeared into the underbrush. The innate escape art was marvelous, so how could Han Exen find Wu Qi when he quickly scanned the area with his divine will? A furious shout came from the void, and a skinny, short old man suddenly appeared, accompanied by a pungent smell of a corpse. Chapter 622. Holding the sword with both hands, Han Exion's eyes shone with a blood-red gleam. He glanced around angrily, then roared at the old man, "You want to kill a man who cultivates the true body of heaven and earth scripture?" The old man paused for a while, looking at Han Exen from head to toe, then asked hesitantly, Are you really the deputy ambassador?" A long roar that sounded like that of a wounded tiger echoed out. Han Exen swung the sword in his left hand fiercely, causing the surrounding air to vibrate. A blood-red beam of starlight shot down from the sky, transforming into a 100-miles-long, arc-shaped sword beam that darted across the sky. Along with countless ghostly wails and wolf howls, the sword beam reached tens of miles away and cut a 1,000-mile-wide mountain range in half. The earth trembled, and countless mountains crumbled. Heavy mountain ridges slammed into the ground, bringing a destructive blow to all the living beings in that area. Countless living beings were crushed by the collapsing mountains. Specks of soul light soared into the sky, all pouring into the sword held in Han Exion's left hand. Immediately, more ghostly wails came out from the sword, along with noises of chewing and swallowing. A blood-red light flashed across the surface of the sword, and its edge seemed to have become much brighter. "Damn it!" Han Exen stamped his feet, gnashed his teeth, and snapped, "Old bastard, what is the name of the man you want to kill? Why do you want to kill him?" Wu Qi frowned. He couldn't let Han Exion keep asking these questions, or it would be bad if he exposed his secrets. Wu Qi, who had transformed into a grain of sand, came next to the old man without making a sound. Then he slowly transformed into an ice dragon python, a silver dragon python among the dragon pythons of fire and ice. However, this ice dragon python that Wu Qi had transformed into was too small, as thin as a strand of hair, and only an inch long. He took a deep breath and transformed all the chaotic energy in his body into the dark ice energy, which was the innate ability of ice dragon pythons. Then, he opened his mouth and shot out a beam of white light that was as thin as a strand of hair, shooting straight toward the back of the old man's head. Wu Qi was only several tens of feet away from the old man. The prime dark handle shot out from the dragon python's mouth was extremely fast and powerful. In just a blink of an eye, it had arrived behind the old man's back and pierced through his body. The old man's body stiffened, and a beam of white light darted out from his forehead, shooting straight towards Han Exen. Han Exen was shocked. He did not know what had ambushed the old man. He instinctively raised his hands and used the army destroyer to block the white light. A rumble rang out, and Han Exen let out an unpleasant groan. The white light abruptly expanded to hundreds of feet in diameter, wrapping Han Exen up with a terrible cold air. The powerful impact pushed him back for more than 1,000 miles, and he still did not stop. Along the way, Han Exen crashed into mountains and mountains, and everything along the way was smashed to pieces by Han Exion's body. Whether it was the mountains or the trees on Pangu continent, they were all hundreds of times harder than their counterparts in outer heavenly realms. Along the way, Han Exen felt a sharp pain in his back, stars swirling before his eyes, a stream of hot air rushing up to his mouth from his chest and abdomen, and a mouthful of blood had rushed up to his throat. But the terrible cold air contained in the white light had frozen the mouthful of blood into ice cubes, making him unable to spit it out even if he wanted to. Putting aside the fact that Han Exen was knocked flying away by his own attack, while Wu Qi was marveling at the terrible power of dragon pythons of fire and ice, the old man's body suddenly turned into ice crystals and drifted away. But a wisp of black smoke flew out of the old man's corpse, transforming into a twisted figure that snapped in the air. "What a shameless junior! How dare you attack me from the back?" Before the voice could fade away, Wu Qi, who had transformed into a dragon python of fire and ice, had dashed out, opened his mouth and swallowed the old man's soul. Stirred by the frigid profound handle, the old man's soul was digested into the tiniest soul particles, and all his memories were searched by Wu Qi, including the details of how he tracked Wu Qi to this place. Sure enough, it was Yu Mu who had paid a huge sum of money to buy Wu Qi's head, and he had provided Wu Qi with the exact location of Wu Qi. The old man's cultivation base was about the same as Wu Qi's, but he had kept a group of Dharma corpses, and was an expert in all kinds of mystifying formations. He thought that he could kill Wu Qi with ease, so as soon as he found out Wu Qi's exact location, he came to kill Wu Qi with all his belongings. Unfortunately, Wu Qi was in cahoots with Han Xin. Before the unlucky old man could figure out who his target was, his 36 Dharma corpses were killed by Wu Qi and Han Xin, and Wu Qi killed him with a despicable sneak attack from behind. "How can Yu Mu pinpoint my exact location?" Wu Qi frowned. "Impossible, absolutely impossible." After pondering for a brief moment, Wu Qi suddenly sneered. He had cultivated the innate chaotic spirit body, which had concealed his aura from the great Tao of heaven and earth. So, not to mention Yu Mu, even the stronger almighty experts could not accurately determine Wu Qi's fate. But Yu Mu still had a way to find out where Wu Qi was. Since he could not find Wu Qi's location, he could find out the location of certain items on Wu Qi's body. It was not difficult at all, unless it was a natal magical artifact that Wu Qi had refined, whose aura matched Wu Qi's. Yu Mu could not find out their location. But, as long as Yu Mu paid attention to the various miscellaneous items on Wu Qi's body, such as his clothes, shoes, and even a piece of energy stone, a gold ingot, or a silver ingot he had received from someone, he would be able to determine Wu Qi's location through them. As the military minister of Hai Province, it was impossible for Wu Qi not to interact with others. Over the past year or so, he had received countless gifts from other military officers and officials from various provinces in Zhong Province, all of which he carried with him and hid in his storage ring. And these gifts could be used by Yu Mu to determine Wu Qi's location through divination. Fortunately, I've also learned the art of divination, and I'm proficient in the Tao of ghosts and deities. Fortunately, I'm smart. Wu Qi shook his head and said, "Fortunately, the one who came to assassinate me this time is not very strong. If it were a gold immortal or someone stronger, he." Laughing coldly, Wu Qi quickly fled into the distance. Along the way, Wu Qi injected a large amount of chaotic energy into his storage ring, using it to clean up all the items in it. As Wu Qi expected, nearly 1,000 items in the ring gave him a strange feeling. But, when the chaotic energy wrapped them up and cleaned them, the strange feeling disappeared. "What a great Yu Mu! I can't believe he actually set up such a trap for me. You're really something. How did these items come to my hands? You're really not an ordinary person to be able to order so many people in Zhong Province to work for you." With a cold snort, Wu Qi did not deal with the hundreds of items. Instead, he flew all the way to Yuya City in Huangsha Province, throwing them away casually. He deliberately threw these valuable gifts from the officials and generals of various provinces in Zhong Province on the side of the main road. They would soon be taken away by pedestrians and caravans. Since Yu Mu was willing to use them to determine Wu Qi's location, he decided to let him waste his energy and blood essence. The divination technique consumed a lot of energy, and when he failed to determine Wu Qi's location again and again, Wu Qi wanted to see what other tricks he had up his sleeves. He could not believe that Yu Mu would use such a method to determine Wu Qi's location, and then hire an assassin to assassinate Wu Qi at a high price. He was really unscrupulous. Wu Qi had only killed his son and disciple, and Wu Qi was not the one who did it. Did they really have such a deep grudge against each other? Laughing aloud, Wu Qi transformed into a gust of wind and flew toward Huangsha Province. Not long after he flew, a starlight flashed in the sky, and an astonishing killing intent shot past Wu Qi's head. The speed was more than 100 times faster than Wu Qi's innate escape art. In the blink of an eye, the figure had disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi stopped in horror. That should be Han Xan, who was accidentally injured by his dragon python breath. What escape art did he use? How could he fly so fast? Wu Qi stared blankly in the direction where Han Xan had disappeared, and he could not come to his senses for a long time. Aobuzen darted out of Wu Qi's hair. Looking at the faint wisp of starlight in the sky, he said lazily, "Don't you think he is very fast? Don't you think he is frighteningly fast? Don't you think your escape art is very slow?" Wu Qi nodded repeatedly. Grabbing Aobuzen, he asked, "What is that escape art? How could it be so fast?" Aobuzen raised a claw and said slowly, "Any celestial lord who has received the title of celestial lord from the celestial court can fly with the power of the stars. This is the so-called flying star escape art, and it is at least 10,000 times faster than the escape art used by immortals of the same realm." Aobuzen spat and cursed. If Lao Tzu had the title of celestial lord, Lao Tzu would definitely run faster than them. "Tisuke, what's the big deal about using the power of the stars? When you reach the realm of Gold Immortal, you will be much faster than that boy just now." Wu Qi was enlightened. This must be the special treatment given by the celestial court to those immortals who submitted to the celestial court, isn't it? The flying star escape art was indeed extraordinary. Reaching out his hand and grabbing at the air, he sniffed the air, which was filled with a strong killing aura and a faint smell of blood. No wonder he could catch up with me so easily. It seems he was injured just now. Wu Qi nodded and said with a smile. Sneering, Wu Qi transformed into a gust of wind and continued moving forward. Before long, he had sneaked out of the Crescent City in Huangsha Province. After gazing at the supreme tower hovering over the city for a while, he dared not to be careless. He retracted all his aura, even closed his eyes tightly, and shrunk his body to a size that was 1,000,000 times smaller than a mustard seed. Then, with an innate escape art, he carefully snuck into the camp outside the city and began to rummage through the tents. Aobuzen shrank his body as well, hiding behind Wu Qi, not daring to breathe too loudly. They all knew that there was a supreme oracle with a frightening cultivation base in the supreme tower, so they did not dare to be careless. Just now, the supreme oracle mistakenly thought that Wu Qi was a subordinate of some prince, so he let Wu Qi go. But this time, he might not be in such a good mood. After searching through the tents one by one, Wu Qi finally found Liu Bang and his company in a magnificent tent near the East City Gate. Han Xen was standing in the tent, cursing and complaining about what had happened to him just now. Chapter 623. The tent measured over 100 feet in both width and length, and was furnished luxuriously, which did not fit in with the tradition of Diyu. Putting aside the many rare and precious items, the most eye-catching item was a pill cauldron in the middle of the tent. It had a greenish-purple exterior, with ancient colors, and looked extremely extraordinary. On the surface of the 10-feet-tall pill cauldron, there were 8 fire nozzles arranged according to the position of the 8 trigrams, which were constantly inhaling and exhaling natural energies. The airflow was like dragons, shuttling back and forth between the 8 fire nozzles. Vaguely, there was a pale purple pill flame bursting out from the pill cauldron. However, it was restrained by the restrictive spell on the pill cauldron, and the temperature in the tent did not rise at all. Zhang Liang was sitting cross-legged on a hassock made of water and fire, performing an incantation gesture with both hands to control the pill flame. It was unknown what kind of pill he was concocting. The pill cauldron was sealed very well, and not even a single wisp of the pill aura could be sensed from it. Only the faint popping noises produced by the reaction of the medicinal liquid in the pill cauldron could be heard. Apart from Zhang Liang, who had his mind fully focused on concocting the pill, Xiao He, who had 3 pupils in his eyes, was sitting on a cloud bed, with a white python skin placed on his lap. He was carefully cutting the skin with a dagger, until it was as thin as a hair. It looked like he was going to weave it into a whip. The three pupils in his eyes were spinning slowly, and a strange force spread out from his body, enveloping the entire tent. A few mosquitoes flew into the tent from outside, but right after they entered the tent, they were suddenly set ablaze, turning into a wisp of green ash that drifted down from the sky. Wu Qi retracted his aura, shrunk his body, and lightly squeezed into the tent. The strange force unleashed by Xiao He swept across Wu Qi's body, but was dodged by Wu Qi using a mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing. Like a slippery loach, he slipped into the tent and came under Han Xian's feet. He climbed up along the leg of Han Xian's pants and hid under Han Xian's collar. Perhaps out of respect for Han Xian, the strange force released by Xiao He disappeared without a trace when it was 3 inches away from Han Xian. Therefore, Wu Qi didn't need to maintain that extremely exhausting breath-holding secret technique at all times. He crossed his legs comfortably on Han Xian's shoulder and listened attentively to Han Xian's story. Han Xian happened to talk about the conversation between him and the shriveled old man that Wu Qi killed. He said that the shriveled old man was killed by Wu Qi's dragon python spray, and Han Xian was also sent flying 1,000 miles by the dragon python spray. Not only did his body suffer frostbite, his army destroyer sword also suffered great damage. The innate ability of the dragon pythons of fire and ice, jet spray, was the best at damaging all kinds of immortal items and magical treasures. It was even more lethal to the item spirits. As a result, Han Xian's prized weapon, the army destroyer, suffered a great loss of its spirit energy and nearly dropped its grade. No matter who that guy is, I won't let him go. Han Xian, who was pacing back and forth in the tent, ended his speech with a furious roar. Zhang Liang opened his eyes, which were faintly glowing with a golden and purple light. He glanced at Han Xian, then closed his eyes again. He locked his hands into an incantation gesture and casually pointed at the cauldron. A faint dragon roar rang out, and a few streams of purple pill energy sprayed out of the cauldron's mouth, forming into the shape of a flying dragon above it. Then, a faint tiger roar rang out, and a few wisps of green pill energy sprayed out of the mouth, forming into a fierce tiger that ran wildly around the cauldron. The dragon and tiger energies attracted and colluded with each other, gradually forming a small whirlwind around the cauldron. Zhang Liang's expression was slightly nervous. His hands kept performing incantation gestures, and a purple immortal talisman shot out of his sleeve, releasing a clear light that enveloped the cauldron and slowed down the speed of the dragon and tiger energies. Cold sweat kept breaking out of his forehead, and his body was shivering slightly. Obviously, it was very strenuous for him. One of Xiao He's legs was crossed on the bed, and the other was lazily placed on the armrest of the bed. While cutting the white python's skin, he chuckled and said, "You don't even know the name of that man, and you don't know why he is chasing after you. Panga continent is so vast, how are you going to get revenge on him? Don't waste your breath. Have you figured out why they are spying on us?" Han Xian stamped his foot and sat down on the bed opposite Xiao He. His eyes went wide as he snorted coldly and said, "I don't even know his name, so how could I know why he is spying on us?" Frowning, Han Xian looked at Zhang Liang and said with a smile, "I did see someone. When I caught up with them, I saw that man transform into a beam of blood light and fly up into the sky. Looking at his back, and the smell of madness coming from him, he looks like an old acquaintance of ours." Xiao He laughed and said, "An old acquaintance? Who else could it be? Don't tell me it's the one who set up the feast at Hongmen?" The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became very strange. Han Xian was stunned for a long time, then pointed a trembling finger at Xiao He and cried out, "How did you get that mouth? Look at his back. He does look like the man who committed suicide at the River Wu." A muffled boom rang out. The pill cauldron that Zhang Liang had been working hard to control suddenly shook, and the energy of dragon and tiger that had taken shape suddenly shattered. The purple immortal talisman swayed and flew back into his sleeve weakly. The lid of the pill cauldron was slowly lifted, and a pungent black smoke rushed out. With a gloomy face, Zhang Liang flicked his sleeve, and a large plume of black smoke flew out of the tent along with his sleeve. The 597th cauldron of Swan Nicc pill of good fortune still failed. It was either a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. In short, the efforts of several years have been wasted. Zhang Liang sighed, stared at Han Exin, and said with a wry smile, "If you hadn't mentioned that man, perhaps this cauldron of pills would have succeeded, and we would all have the hope of becoming gold immortals, real gold immortals, instead of fake gold immortals whose magic power and cultivation base have been forcibly raised by someone." Han Exin spread his hands and made an expression that he did not mean it. Next to him, Xiao He sighed and said, "Forget it. The old immortal said that it would take 600 cauldrons of hard work to concoct this Swan Nicc pill of good fortune, and 2 more cauldrons of pills would be enough. The old immortal has never missed a word. Just work harder." Zhang Liang nodded slowly with a gloomy face. He spread his sleeve, and a stream of yellow mist sprayed out of it, pulling the pill cauldron back into his sleeve. Then he walked slowly out of the tent and cried out, "This cauldron of spirit pills used to heal the celestial angels has failed. Make me 30 portions of them according to the prescription I gave you." Vaguely, they could hear some officials from Diyu whispering something to Zhang Liang. After that, Zhang Liang returned to the tent, put down the flap, and added a few powerful restrictive spells on it. The 3 pupils in Xiao He's eyes shone with a bright light. In just a blink of an eye, the strange force unleashed from his body enveloped the entire tent, as well as dozens of tents nearby. On the large bed placed in the tent, Lu Bang, who was lying on the bed like a dead man, suddenly stood up straight. He spat out a mouthful of sticky, bloody saliva onto the snow-white carpet, then said through clenched teeth, "Xiangyu? He, what a sensitive nose. I can't be wrong, that man must be Xiangyu." Zhang Liang, Xiao He, and Han Exin turned to look at Lu Bang together. "Wine," said Lu Bang lazily as he stretched out his hand. A large golden peony flower flickered in the air, then a long-haired lady, clad in a light veil and possessing an outstanding beauty, drifted out of it. She brought out a white jade wine cauldron that could hold about a bucket of wine and placed it in Lu Bang's hand. Lu Bang took a sip of the wine and rinsed his mouth, then sprayed the wine mixed with blood onto the ground. He put one arm around the slender waist of the long-haired lady, pressed her down on the bed, and began fondling her. While drinking, Lu Bang said, "Have you forgotten what the old immortal said? He said that Xiangyu might still be alive." Laughing coldly, Lu Bang patted the buttocks of the beautiful lady, whose face was already flushed and moaning. With that, a large sheet of golden light that looked like the petals of a peony burst out of the lady's body, then vanished without a trace. Lu Bang crossed his legs and held the white jade wine cauldron with both hands. Grinning coldly, he said, "If not, why would the old immortal leave behind the Green City clan in Great Han Dynasty? Am I right, Reverend Li Yang?" Suddenly, the curtain leading into the tent was lifted, and Reverend Li Yang walked out slowly. He cupped his fist and bowed to Lu Bang in a flattering manner, then said in a low voice, "Your Majesty is right. Didn't my ancestral master leave behind the Green City clan in that small kiliacosm to trace the whereabouts of those people? It's just that the disciples in the mortal world are too incompetent, as they haven't found their whereabouts after so many years." Reverend Li Yang chuckled, then shook his head and said, "But, according to common sense, since those people have a backer behind them, it is possible that they have ascended from that small kiliacosm called Earth to an outer heavenly realm, and then come to Pangu continent to stir up trouble. If your Majesty says that person is Xiangyu, then it must be him." After a brief moment of pondering, Lu Bang laughed coldly. He finished the wine in the cauldron, then said through clenched teeth, "Send Yulin to trace Xiangyu's whereabouts. Once you find him, kill him on the spot. Capture Yuji alive." Xiao He and Han Exin exchanged a glance, then Han Exin nodded and said, "I'll be in charge of this." Lu Bang nodded slowly. Suddenly, he drew a line in the air, ripping a large opening in the empty void. A burly man, whose body was covered with over 30 talismans and shackled, fell out of the opening and fell heavily in front of Lu Bang. Stepping on the man's face, Lu Bang grinned coldly and said, "Jing Mo, Lao Tzu knows you are Celestial Lord De Hua's loyal confidant, and we are on the same side. But that stab of yours has made Lao Tzu very unhappy. How much energy did Lao Tzu have to waste to pretend to be dead? So, we have to raise the price. Tell your celestial lord that if you don't raise the price, Lao Tzu will tell everyone about your plan. Under the furious gaze of Jing Mo, who had fallen to the ground, Lu Bang shook his head complacently and said, "Your plan is too big. Lao Tzu can get too little benefit, but he has to bear such a great risk. If you don't give Lao Tzu more benefits, even if you have the backing of Buddhist League, Lao Tzu will still not buy it." Since Lao Tzu has become the celestial lord, do you think it's so easy for you to succeed without feeding Lao Tzu? Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Han Exin, and Reverend Liang burst out laughing. Amidst the laughter, the former military minister of Huangsha province, Jing Mo's face turned extremely unsightly. He gritted his teeth and stared at Lu Bang for a long time, then asked word by word, "How much do you want?" Lu Bang narrowed his eyes and calculated for a moment. Suddenly he laughed and said, "With the help of the 8 treasures lotus throne, I can help Lao Tzu attain the body of the immortal dragon emperor, and help Lao Tzu's confidants attain the cultivation base of peak-level gold immortals. I don't think I can't do such a small thing, can I?" Before Lu Bang could finish his words, a strange force suddenly came crashing down, making Xiao He's body tremble. "Your Majesty, that old fogey wants to see you." Chapter 624. Before Xiao He could finish his words, the white jade wine cauldron in Lu Bang's hand had magically vanished. A trail of blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth, and a large amount of blood oozed out of his chest. Rolling his eyes, he fell back onto the bed. Reverend Liang leaped forward as if he had just lost his parents, grabbing Lu Bang's shoulders with both hands and crying out, "Your Majesty, you must hold on. I have top-notch elixirs here. Nothing will happen to you." He fished out a few pills made of unknown materials and shoved them into Lu Bang's mouth, then produced a jade bottle out of nowhere and poured a few mouthfuls of water into Lu Bang's mouth. As soon as the pills rolled into Lu Bang's stomach, a flush returned to Lu Bang's pale face, and his chest began to rise and fall slightly, as if he could breathe again. Xiao He and Han Exin flew to Lu Bang's bed as well, performing an incantation gesture and reciting a spell, sprinkling a large sheet of immortal light from their palms to envelop Lu Bang's body. It was a mystic technique, the incantation of soul recovery, which could stabilize the injury and keep the immortal soul and the immortal body from being separated, preventing the source of the immortal body from being damaged. Xiao He and Han Exin had exerted all their strength. Beads of sweat kept rolling down their foreheads, and their bodies trembled as they squeezed out the last bit of immortal energy in their bodies, trying to stabilize Lu Bang's divine soul and injury. Zhang Liang cried out helplessly, "Somebody, bring me the herbs. Bring me the herbs. I'm going to concoct pills for His Majesty to save his life." Muffled footsteps rang out as Fan Kuai strode out of the tent like a steel wall, armed with a shield and a dagger and clad in a heavy armor. His voice rang out like a thunderclap as he snapped, "Haven't you found the whereabouts of that damned Jing Mo and his family? I'm going to chop his entire family into minced meat and feed them to the wolves. I'm going to refine their souls with heavenly thunder and earthly fire so that they can never be reincarnated." Hiding on Han Exion's shoulder, Wu Qi watched the performance of Lu Bang and the others and was really amazed. The strange force that Xiao He had released suddenly retracted, all of it shrinking back into his body. The flap of the tent moved, and 2 people slowly walked in. Wu Qi withdrew all of his aura and carefully turned his head to look at the 2 people walking in. The person in the lead was about 6 feet tall. He was neither tall nor short, not fat nor thin, not dark nor fair, not ugly nor handsome. His facial features and temperament were all ordinary, and even his hair was white like that of an ordinary old man. The ratio of white and black was almost 1-to-1. Everything about him gave people a sense of stability and harmony. The old man was clad in a grayish-white linen coat, with a hemp rope tied around his waist and a pair of straw sandals woven from hemp fiber. He walked in at a steady pace. No aura emanated from him, and he looked just like an ordinary old man. But as soon as he opened his eyes, what he saw gave Wu Qi a great shock. There were no eyeballs or other organs in the old man's eye sockets, only two thumb-sized ghost flames rolling rapidly in them. In the deep, pitch-black eye sockets, two green ghostly fires were spinning rapidly. Two extremely ferocious blood-red eyes could be vaguely seen in the ghostly fires, staring straight ahead. Vaguely, a ferocious and violent dragon roar could be heard coming from the two ghostly fires. Wu Qi could not sense any life force from the old man, either. He was an old man who had come to the end of his life, and was only relying on miraculous pills to keep him alive. His fleshly body gave Wu Qi the feeling that he was only left with a layer of skin. It was highly possible that his internal organs had lost their normal functions a long, long time ago. It was only because he had been using spirit medicines to sustain his life, and had a powerful beast soul to nourish his soul, that he was still alive. An old oracle who had reached such a realm must be the master of the supreme tower hovering over his head, the supreme oracle who presided over the Crescent City. He was also the supreme oracle who had caught up with Wu Qi and Xiangyu with his divine will when Wu Qi took Xiangyu away, and taught them a painful lesson. Star grade, moon grade, sun grade, and then the supreme oracle who had surpassed the sun grade. He was an expert whose overall strength could rival the primordial immortals of the celestial court, and the true pillar of the human race Indiyu. Wu Qi glanced at him cautiously, and dared not to look at him any longer. Hastily, he shifted his eyes to the man behind him. For an old oracle like him, even though he had concealed all his aura and divine will, he had lived for countless years, and his spiritual sense was still very strong. Perhaps, if Wu Qi looked at him for too long, he would have some kind of sudden impulse. Looking at him was stressful, and if Wu Qi looked at him for too long, he might expose himself. Wu Qi turned to look at the middle-aged man, who was clad in a black brocade robe and had a jade belt around his waist. His long hair hung loosely over his shoulders, and a headband was tied around his forehead, while a thumb-sized amethyst was inlaid between his eyebrows. He gave off the impression of old-fashioned, dull, numb, and stiff. When he walked, he looked like a wooden man, and even the length of each step was exactly the same. In addition to his bony, sluggish, numb, and stiff body, the man gave off a feeling of superiority. It was as if a wooden statue of a deity had suddenly appeared in front of everyone, giving off a great sense of oppression and pressure. Wu Qi knew the background of such a man. He was from the most traditional and conservative clans in Indiyu, and the children they raised were all like this. He had received the cruelest, hell-like training since he was a child, and had grasped an extremely powerful strength since he was a child. He had the power to decide the life and death of millions of people with just a word, and he could take whatever he wanted under the heavens, but he knew nothing about the ways of the world, and did not understand the ways of the world. Generally speaking, those sons of powerful clans in Great Yu were like this. But, when Wu Qi looked at the man's face, he found it very familiar. After rummaging through his memory for a while, Wu Qi's body suddenly trembled, and his face turned pale. He stared fixedly at the man's face, clenching his fists tightly. Many years ago, when Yen Dan was telling Wu Qi about their journey to Myriad Immortals' planet, he had drawn the face of the mysterious man in black into a portrait, and asked Wu Qi to remember it. At that time, Yen Dan was just hoping that Wu Qi could meet the mysterious and powerful man in black during his travels. But, little did he expect that Wu Qi would see the face again in this place. Perhaps they were not the same person, but they must be very close by blood. The face of this black-clothed man was more than 95% similar to the face in the portrait. The person in the portrait was slightly more mature and seemed to be much older, while the black-clothed man in front of him was slightly more tender and much younger than the person in the portrait. But, Wu Qi was sure that these two men were indeed directly related by blood. Even their expressions were exactly the same, stiff and rigid like a coffin. Wu Qi recalled the main reason why he and Princess Zhangli left Myriad Immortals' planet, to find a way to break the restrictive spell cast on Great Yan's nascent divinity. He gave the middle-aged man a look. Perhaps he was the key to the solution. When Zhang Liang and the others, who were busy with their work, saw the two men, Zhang Liang immediately bowed and said, "Great Oracle Yugu. And who is this fellow Taoist?" Without saying a word, Yugu waved his hand and walked over to the bed where Lu Bang was lying, frowning as he looked at Lu Bang, who was lying on the bed and looked like he would die at any moment. He shook his head and sighed, then fished out a black wooden bottle from under his sleeve and placed it on the table next to the bed. "This is the black blood powder I concocted in secret," he said in a hoarse voice. "It can remove toxins, stop bleeding, and nourish the soul. If you are not afraid, take it. If not, you can do whatever you want with it." With a cold snort, Yugu walked slowly to the side of the bed and sat down, then closed his eyes without saying a word. The man in black who followed Yugu and said dryly, "I'm Liu, King Yang Qiu, and the Eastern General of Liangzhu. I heard that the Celestial Ambassador was seriously injured by an assassin. I'm leading an army to wipe out the rebels of Myriad Immortal Alliance, so I've come to visit." Before Zhang Liang could respond, King Yang Qiu grabbed him by the shoulder and flipped him to the side. Zhang Liang staggered back a dozen steps, nearly knocking down a large number of furnishings in the room. With a gloomy face, King Yang Qiu walked slowly to the side of the bed where Lu Bang was lying, looking down at Lu Bang, who looked like he might die at any moment. Instinctively, Han Xian and Fan Kuai took a step sideways and stood in front of King Yang Qiu. King Yang Qiu looked up at Han Xian and Fan Kuai, then said coolly, "I just want to see the Celestial Ambassador's injury." "His Majesty is seriously injured," Han Xian said coolly. "Please don't come any closer, lest your blood offend the Celestial Ambassador." King Yang Qiu pursed his lips, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. This was his smile. "Don't worry," he said in a deep voice, "I love the blood of immortals the most. I've led an army to wipe out the rebels, fought in 175 gathering places of itinerant cultivators in 36 provinces, and personally killed more than 4,500 immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance." Fan Kuai took a deep breath, then shoved his shoulder at King Yang Qiu and bellowed, "Get out of my way." King Yang Qiu snorted coldly and shoved his shoulder at Fan Kuai as well. A muffled boom rang out as a shower of light burst out of Fan Kuai's heavy armor. The immortal armor was shattered by the tremendous force. Fan Kuai gave a muffled snort as his body spun and staggered back dozens of steps, smashing two shelves displaying countless treasures. Roaring furiously, he smashed the tent and threw himself out of the tent, lying flat on the ground. Anyone who dares to offend this king has only one path, death. King Yang Qiu stared coldly at Han Xian, who was standing in front of him, and said in a deep voice, "I just want to see the Celestial Ambassador's injury. By the way, I want to know where Jing Yimo, the left military minister of Huangsha province, who assassinated the Celestial Ambassador, is? Did you really kill him on the spot? If he is not dead, hand him over to me. I want to put him in an important position." Han Xian's face turned pale with anger. Gritting his teeth, he cried out, "Are you here to provoke us, Your Excellency?" After pondering for a moment, King Yang Qiu nodded and said, "I don't like the immortals of your celestial court, and I'm indeed here to provoke you." King Yang Qiu twitched the corner of his mouth again, pretending to be a smile. "The best immortal is a dead one. What do you think?" he said with a cold grin. Han Xian was furious. He clenched his fists tightly, looking like he wanted to kill King Yang Qiu with a single punch. King Yang Qiu sneered and suddenly threw a punch at Han Xian's face. Chapter 625. King Yang Qiu's sudden punch took Han Xian by surprise. As his cultivation base was far weaker than King Yang Qiu's, Han Xian could not even see where the punch was coming from before it pierced through a helmet shaped like a wolf's head that suddenly appeared over Han Xian's face and smashed heavily into Han Xian's face. A pained groan rang out as Han Xian was sent flying, crashing headfirst into the inner part of the tent. A series of feminine cries rang out as the curtain between the inner and outer parts of the tent was knocked open, revealing dozens of gorgeously dressed female immortals. When they saw Han Xian fly in with a swollen face, They could not help but shout and yell at him, unleashing all kinds of flying swords and magical treasures to rain down on King Yangqiu. King Yangqiu gave a cold snort. 2 balls of black flame spun rapidly in his eyes, and countless black threads shot out of them, hitting the vital acupoints of the female immortals. All the flying swords and magical treasures froze in midair at the same time, and the female immortals snapped, "How dare you bitches? Kneel down before me!" Like puppets controlled by strings, the female immortals dropped to their knees and threw themselves on the ground with lifeless eyes, putting on a posture that showed they were at King Yangqiu's mercy. Hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, Wu Qi's eyes lit up. "This is the restrictive technique. This is it." The black threads shooting out of King Yangqiu's eyes were exactly the same as the ones that Yen Dan had shown to Wu Qi. Clearly, King Yangqiu had an inseparable relationship with the person who imprisoned Yen Dan and the others. This kind of secret restrictive technique was passed down from generation to generation in the Yu's clans, so it was impossible for too many people to know about it. Wu Qi began to think about how he could subdue King Yangqiu and learn this restrictive technique. But when Wu Qi looked at Yu Gu, who was sitting silently on the bed, and then at King Yangqiu, who was shrouded in a dark mist and emanating a towering murderous aura, he wisely dismissed the idea of robbing them. Both of their cultivations were too strong, and Wu Qi was far from being a match for them. After knocking down Han Xian with one punch and subduing dozens of female immortals around Lu Bang, King Yangqiu grinned hideously and reached out to grab Lu Bang's neck. Standing off to the side, Xiao He sighed and cried out in a deep voice, "Why is King Yangqiu so aggressive? King Yangqiu, do you dare to look at me?" The tricolored pupils in Xiao He's eyes began to spin rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, they turned into a splendid screen of light. An eerie, evil power came out of Xiao He's eyes, and the surrounding space suddenly shook. It seemed that something wonderful was happening. King Yangqiu snorted coldly and turned to look at Xiao He. "Why not?" he cried out in a low voice. As soon as their eyes met, King Yangqiu's body trembled, and his movements became extremely slow and stiff. It was as if both his soul and fleshly body were frozen in ice, and he had lost the menacing vitality he had a moment ago. The 2 black fireballs in King Yangqiu's eyes gradually dimmed, and his aura gradually dissipated. It was as if his soul had been sucked into some unknown space, and he could no longer control his body and power. Suddenly, Xiao He let out a muffled groan. A hair-thin wound, no more than an inch long, had opened up on his forehead. A trickle of blood flowed out of the wound and gradually slid down his cheek. But, on the other hand, a huge gash about half a foot long, about the size of a thumb, through which the white bone could be seen. Blood kept gushing out of it, and in the blink of an eye, the upper body of King Yangqiu was stained bright red. King Yangqiu let out a low cry of pain. He slowly raised his hands, trying to strangle Xiao He. But the tricolored pupils in Xiao He's eyes were spinning faster and faster, and King Yangqiu had only raised his hands half a foot before he slowly put them down again. Suddenly, Xiao He's body trembled, and an arrow of blood as thick as a finger spurted out of his chest, piercing through his clothes. But a fist-sized hole opened up in his chest, and blood gushed out from both the front and back of the hole. King Yangqiu staggered and suddenly collapsed to the ground. Xiao He's face grew paler and paler, and gradually his skin turned transparent like crystal. Through his transparent skin and muscles, one could see that his skull was a magnificent black and gold color, with countless runes swirling around it. His skull no longer looked like a normal skull, but a powerful immortal artifact. It was a terrible divine ability that used one's own body as the material and heaven and earth as the furnace to refine oneself into an immortal artifact. Even the 3 pupils in his eyes were something that he had refined after birth. Amidst a cracking sound, the bones in both of Xiao He's legs were broken at the same time. King Yangqiu cried out in pain as all the bones in his legs were shattered at the same time, from the base of his thighs to the space between his toes. King Yangqiu's legs were twisted into bizarre shapes. His face turned blue with pain, and cold sweat kept breaking out all over his body. But he still could not get rid of the control of Xiao He's 3 pupils. The weakness of the human warrior's soul force being far too weak was exposed at this moment. Before he could protect his soul, or even wake up the beast's soul sleeping in the depths of his soul, King Yang Qiu was controlled by Xiao He's bizarre eyes and instantly suffered a severe injury. Off to the side, Yu Gu slowly rose to his feet and opened his eyes, in which a ghostly flame was burning fiercely. Two blood-red pupils almost occupied his entire eye sockets, and a wild dragon roar could be heard coming from the two balls of ghostly flame. Grinning coldly, Yu Gu said, "How audacious! How dare you injure my Diyu royal family in front of me? Heh, do you really think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're angels?" Grinning coldly, Yu Gu slowly reached out a finger and pointed at Xiao He. At that moment, Zhang Liang, who had been standing off to the side, suddenly let out a long cry. With his right hand, he produced a large white brush, measuring 4 feet and 9 inches long and glinting with bright light, and swung it in the air. A clear and melodious voice of a man rang out from the brush. "The ocean rages, the ancient mountains crumble, the river of stars scatter, the vast sun vanishes." Amidst a bright flash of light, Zhang Liang held the brush in his hand and smashed it heavily on Yu Gu's back like a blacksmith hammering at iron. "How dare you attack an angel, Yu Gu? Are you trying to provoke a war between Diyu and the Celestial Court?" Zhang Liang snapped. No one knew where the brush came from, but it contained a terrible power. Even Wu Qi, who was hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, could sense the fluctuation of immortal energy contained in it, which was comparable to the aura emanated by Patriarch Miao Ying. A deep, muffled rumble of thunder echoed out. Caught unprepared, Yu Gu howled miserably as large sheets of ghost flame burst out of his 7 apertures at the same time. There was not much blood left in Yu Gu's body. Instead, it was filled with the fire energy condensed from the ghostly green ghost flame, which was closely related to his life. The blow was equivalent to an ordinary man bleeding from his 7 apertures, and Yu Gu was instantly severely injured. Roaring furiously, he turned around and snapped, "A primordial immortal artifact. Which almighty expert lent you this? How dare you attack me from behind with a primordial immortal artifact? Don't you have any shame, Celestial Court? Are you out of your mind? How dare you hurt me and King Yang Qiu? Is Celestial Court really going to war with me, do you?" Zhang Liang stood next to Xiao He with his hand clenched tightly on the writing brush. Staring at Yu Gu with his starry eyes, Zhang Liang smiled faintly and said, "If King Yang Qiu hadn't forced us, how could we have done such a thing? King of Han is seriously injured, and yet, King Yang Qiu still treated him so rudely. If word of this gets out, I'm afraid the Celestial Court is in the right, while the Yu is in the wrong, isn't it?" With a proud smile on his face, Zhang Liang held his head high and said, "Even if we bring this matter to those almighty experts, the one who will be scolded will not be the Celestial Court, will it?" "Those almighty experts?" Wu Qi's eyes darted from side to side. Who were those almighty experts Zhang Liang mentioned? Was it a group of people, or some other existences? Zhang Liang's words had obviously frightened Yu Gu. Yu Gu, who was about to fly into a rage out of humiliation and kill Zhang Liang and the others on the spot, hesitated for a moment, then suddenly dispersed the energy he had been accumulating in his body and said in a deep voice, "No matter what, you have to stop first. If you do seriously injure King Yang Qiu, even if you have the backing of a primordial immortal, you will not be able to get away with it." Zhang Liang smiled. Just as he was about to ask Xiao He to release King Yang Qiu, a dragon roar suddenly rang out of King Yang Qiu's body. At first, the dragon roar was faint and faint, like the chirping of a bug in the grass at night. But in the blink of an eye, it became loud and vigorous, like the first thunderclap that rang out when the world was created. Accompanied by countless deafening rumbles, the roar spread out in all directions. With just one roar, the tents they were in were blown into pieces. Countless tents and camps in the surroundings were shaken away by the roar. Tens of thousands of soldiers were blown away by the tremendous sound wave, wailing and wailing as they were sent flying far away. Even the 4 walls of Yuya City, which had just been rebuilt, were blown to pieces. All the buildings in the city, big and small, collapsed at the same time, and countless boulders were thrown into the air by the sound wave. The mountain behind them was shaken by the thunderous roar and collapsed by hundreds of miles. On the other side, a 10-mile-high wave rose from the crescent lake, and countless fishes, shrimps, crabs, and other creatures in the lake all exploded and died. Inside the tent, Zhang Liang, Han Exin, Fan Kuai, and the others were bleeding from their 7 orifices at the same time, while Lu Bang, lying on the bed, let out a miserable howl and jumped up and down. Hiding on Han Xian's shoulder, Wu Qi felt as if 10,000 thunderbolts had exploded in his ears at the same time. His eardrums were torn, and stars were flashing before his eyes. For a long time, he did not know where he was. Ao Buzan poked his head out of Wu Qi's hair and looked thoughtfully at King Yangqiu. His beast soul is Pu Lao. No wonder the roar was so loud. The one who was the most seriously injured in the tent was Xiao He, who had controlled King Yangqiu with his 3 pupils. An arrow of blood sprayed out from his mouth, flying over 100 feet away. A large amount of blood sprayed out like a fountain, as if all the blood in his body had been squeezed out by this roar. 2 of the 3 pupils in Xiao He's eyes had cracked and were no longer in shape. Clearly, his divine abilities and mystic arts had been severely damaged. Accompanied by a cruel laugh, King Yangqiu's body slowly floated up into the air. Looking coldly at Lu Bang, who was standing on the bed and picking his ears, King Yangqiu sneered and said, "So, this is the seriously injured angel?" With a wild laugh, a jade knife suddenly appeared in King Yangqiu's hand, and he brought it down heavily toward Lu Bang's neck. Chapter 626. It was made of supreme-grade black jade, about 6 feet long, crescent-shaped, and as thin as a cicada's wing. It was engraved with the true forms of countless ghosts and deities, and was shrouded in a faint black smoke. The ghosts and deities were looming in the smoke like living creatures, and from time to time, deep howls could be heard coming out of it. The handle of the jade knife was carved with a Pu Lao, who was lying prostrate on the ground with his mouth wide open as if he was roaring loudly. Pu Lao's eyes were inlaid with blood-colored gems, and they gave off a faint chill that made one's hair stand on end. King Yangqiu brandished the knife at Lu Bang. Accompanied by the roars of millions of celestial fiends, an immense knife energy swept out, and a chilly wind rose from the ground within 1,000 feet around him. The chilly wind rushed straight into everyone's bodies, making them shudder. Even a general as brave as Fan Kuai felt his body go limp, and for a moment, he did not have the strength to rescue Lu Bang. Covered in blood, Lu Bang looked at King Yangqiu, who was also covered in blood, and asked word by word, "King Yangqiu, do you really dare to kill me?" The bones in King Yangqiu's legs were creaking, and his bones were healing rapidly. Without saying a word, he stared fixedly at Lu Bang, clenched his teeth, and swung the knife down. He had used all his strength in this attack. Even a gold immortal would be cut in half by him, not to mention Lu Bang, a mere 32nd tier heaven immortal. The whistling sound of the knife had rendered Fan Kuai powerless to move, let alone Zhang Liang, Xiao He, and Han Xian, whose will to fight was far weaker than Fan Kuai's. They cried out almost at the same time as they watched King Yangqiu swing the knife down. This was especially true for Xiao He, whose eyes had been severely injured by Pu Lao's howl. Blood gushed out of his eyes like arrows, as if he was going to spew out all the blood that had yet to flow out of his body. Yu Mu, who had just been severely wounded by a full-force blow from a primordial immortal artifact, grinned hideously as he watched King Yangqiu hack at Lu Bang. Yu Gu snapped in a low voice, do it now. After putting up with the celestial court for so many years, it's time to settle the score with them. Just chop him down, he's just an angel." Seeing that the jade knife was about to cut his body, Lu Bang suddenly laughed. Amidst the laughter, the flamboyant Lu Bang, who was no different from a local ruffian, disappeared without a trace. A strong pale golden light poured out of Lu Bang's body as he stuck out his chest, and his body seemed to have grown much taller than before as he clenched his fist and punched at King Yangqiu's blade. Other than Wu Qi, who opened his primal chaos divine eyes to look at the source of the light. Everyone else was forced to close their eyes. But the light pierced through everyone's eyelids, causing them a sharp pain in their eyeballs and causing tears to flow down their cheeks. Only Wu Qi's eyes flickered with a bright gleam as he saw everything that happened in that instant. A tall, burly figure appeared behind Lu Bang. Lu Bang, who had become dignified, solemn, and domineering, clenched his right fist, and a vague dragon claw could be seen on it. Clutching a crimson pearl in the middle of the claw, he thrust it toward King Yangqiu's jade knife. A strong light surged as Lu Bang's fist collided with the jade knife and shattered it. Lu Bang, who had always been so lazy and looked like a bandit who was even worse than a ruffian, suddenly moved like a tyrannosaurus who had been curled up for a long time and was awakened by a thunderbolt. As soon as he moved, it was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking, as if heavenly thunders and earthly fires were sweeping out. Around him, 9 golden dragons of light wheeled and danced in the air as they swooped toward King Yangqiu with a sonorous dragon roar. A set of strangely shaped golden armor covered Lu Bang's body. The armor was shaped like a golden dragon, and Lu Bang looked like a standing golden dragon. He held a crimson pearl in his right hand and a dazzling golden longsword in his left. With the sword in his left hand and the fist in his right hand, he punched out like a storm. Every part of his body, whether it was his head, his shoulders, his hands, his elbows, his knees, or his feet, had turned into a lethal weapon powerful enough to shatter the stars. Accompanied by a sonorous dragon roar, they pounced forward. King Yangqiu had never dreamed that Lu Bang, a mere 32nd tier heaven immortal, could possess such an overall strength that he could launch such a brutal counterattack. How could the cultivation base Lu Bang displayed at the moment be that of a heaven immortal? Even an ordinary high-tier gold immortal might not have such a strength. Every punch could shatter the stars, every kick could shatter the earth, and every attack had the power to tear the void apart. Caught off guard, King Yangqiu was swept into Lu Bang's storm-like attacks and suffered tens of thousands of heavy blows in just a split second. Trapped by Xiao He's 3 pupils, King Yangqiu's severely wounded body had lost more than half of his overall strength. How could he be a match for Lu Bang at this moment? No one knew the origin of the pearl and the sword in Lu Bang's hand, but wherever the pearl passed, everything was shattered, and wherever the sword passed, everything was cut in half. Strong lights of various colors kept bursting out of King Yangqiu's body. As a king of the imperial clan of Diyu dynasty, he had countless life-saving spirit items and treasures. But whether they were spirit talismans, bone armors, life-saving puppets, or other mystic arts, they were all either shattered by Lu Bang's hand holding the pearl, or cut in half by the sword in his left hand. Muffled sounds of bombardment could be heard coming from King Yangqiu's body. What King Yangqiu cultivated was a secret cultivation technique of Diyu dynasty, the Pangutru body, and his fleshly body was now shockingly strong. But under Lu Bang's attack, King Yangqiu's bones and tendons were broken, and his body was pierced in several places by the sword in Lu Bang's hand. The sharpness of the sword left one speechless. On several occasions, if King Yangqiu had not moved his body, the sword would have pierced through his vital parts and killed him on the spot. Lu Bang laughed in a deep voice. King Yangqiu, what gives you the right to be so presumptuous in front of me? Just because you are a member of Diyu dynasty? A loud dragon roar rang out as Lu Bang laughed and said, Lao Tzu is also a human emperor. In front of Lao Tzu, you are nothing. Then, he lashed out with a heavy kick and slapped King Yangqiu in the face. The sound of bones breaking rang out as King Yangqiu's cheekbone and upper ribs were shattered. A great amount of blood mixed with broken pieces of flesh sprayed out of his mouth. Howling miserably, King Yangqiu was knocked flying hundreds of miles away like a cannonball, leaving a white trail in the air that was visible to the naked eye. Wu Qi was frightened by the sight. He estimated the power of Lu Bang's kick, and knew that if it had landed on Wu Qi, his body would have been turned into nothingness in an instant, leaving not even ashes behind. The power of the kick had reached the limit of some kind of power, and if it went one step further, it would reach a realm that Wu Qi could not comprehend for the time being. Suddenly, the golden armor disappeared, and Lu Bang, who looked mighty just a moment ago, fell to the ground with a pale face. "Beauties, help me," he screamed. I'm cramping all over. Bastard. I can't use divine abilities that are not cultivated by myself. Every time I use them, I get cramps all over my body. Help me. My balls hurt, I'm cramping there too." The female immortals who had been controlled by King Yang Qiu with restrictive magic staggered to their feet from the ruins around them. Pu Lao's roar had not only shattered Yuya City and the entire military camp, but had also left them coughing up blood and covered in wounds. However, King Yang Qiu did not really harm their immortal souls, but only temporarily controlled them. So, when they heard Lu Bang's howl, they were still able to struggle to their feet. A group of female immortals, covered in blood, threw themselves onto Lu Bang and skillfully massaged Lu Bang's tendons and bones. Lu Bang's face turned purple with pain, and he kept howling, trembling all over. A fierce gleam flashed across Yugu's face as he slowly raised his right hand. Countless oracles floated down from the supreme tower in the sky, and muffled footsteps could be heard coming from all directions as a large number of Diyu's soldiers lined up in battle formations approached from all directions. One after another, the decks of the flying ships in the sky were removed, revealing various war machines that gleamed brightly inside. Some of the oracles began to recite incantations and sing ancient ballads to summon ghosts and deities. A deep, ferocious laugh came from a distance as King Yang Qiu flew back, his bones broken and tendons torn. "Angel Lu Bang, what kind of show are you playing? Are you seriously injured and waiting to be killed? Is this how you look like? Jing Mo is one of your men? Hehe, you can fool others, but you can't fool me." The army had completely surrounded them. Twitching all over, Lu Bang tilted his eyes at King Yang Qiu and showed no intention of talking to him. Yugu clenched his fists. Just as he was about to give the order to capture Lu Bang and the others alive, a beam of golden light suddenly sprinkled down from the sky. For a moment, an immortal tune was heard, and countless golden petals fell from the sky like a snowstorm. Amidst the golden light, a hazy figure shrouded in purple mist drifted down with a golden scroll in his hand. "King of Han, Lu Bang, receive the decree." Hovering in the sky, the purple figure said coolly, "This is the decree of the great heavenly venerate. The matter of myriad immortal alliance will be solved by Diyu himself. As the immortal king of the celestial court, Lu Bang, the king of Han, should protect the interests of the celestial court. What does the dispute between Diyu and myriad immortal alliance have to do with the celestial court? This matter is settled, and no one in the celestial court is allowed to interfere in it." The purple figure threw away the golden scroll, then fished out a piece of black jade the size of a child's arm from under his sleeve and threw it to King Yang Qiu. "The human emperor has decreed that no subject of Diyu is allowed to make things difficult for King of Han and his party. Anyone who dares to disobey will have his entire clan executed." King Yang Qiu took the black jade with a blank expression. A beam of light shot out from his forehead and touched it. Then he gave a cold snort, spun, and disappeared into the supreme tower hovering in the sky. Yu Gu, the old oracle, also gave the purple figure a few glances with a flicker in his eyes. At last, he did not have the courage to violate the human emperor's decree, so he bowed his head, transformed into a gust of black wind, and flew back into the supreme tower. Wu Qi looked curiously at the purple figure. The reaction of the celestial court was very strange. The celestial court was not going to interfere in the matter between myriad immortal alliance and Diyu. Didn't that mean the immortals of the alliance were being slaughtered by Diyu? Myriad Immortal Alliance was just a collection of itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent. How could they fight against the officials of Diyu? Lu Bang, who was screaming in pain a moment ago, jumped to his feet in high spirits. He raised his hands and cried out joyfully, "Great Heavenly Venerable, you are wise. Lao Tzu has long wanted to leave this mess behind. Wouldn't it be better to go to Liangzhu and enjoy life as soon as possible?" Laughing wildly, Lu Bang clapped his hands and said, "Fan Kuai, prepare the ceremonial array and return to Liangzhu." Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then flew lightly up into the sky with a gust of wind and headed straight for the Supreme Tower. Ao Buzan was startled by Wu Qi's bold move. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.